An omega without a pack is better off dead. That's what the council elder had declared when they cast Rhea into the frozen wasteland. But as 30 wolves circled her cabin during the worst blizzard in a century, Rhea would learn that some fates were far more complicated than death, and that the most dangerous predator wasn't always the one you could see. Chapter 1. The Last Omega. The wind screamed like a dying animal. Rhea pressed her shoulder against the cabin door, feeling the ancient wood groan under the pressure. Snow forced its way through the cracks, dusting her bare feet with ice that burned like fire. Outside, in the howling darkness, she could hear them, scratching, not the desperate clawing of wild animals seeking shelter. This was methodical, purposeful, the sound of claws dragging down wood in a rhythm that spoke of intelligence, of patience, of hunting. 30 wolves. She'd counted them through the frosted window before the blizzard turned the world into a wall of white. 30 pairs of eyes reflecting the last light of dusk. 30 reasons why she wouldn't survive until morning. An omega without a pack is better off dead. Elder Marana's words echoed in her mind as Rhea wedged the wooden chair under the door handle. Her hands trembled not from cold, though the temperature had dropped so low her breath crystallized in the air, but from the suppressants wearing off. She could feel it happening, that terrible awakening of her wolf that the council had chemically silenced for 5 years. The scratching stopped. Rhea froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. Silence was worse than noise. Silence meant they were thinking, planning, coordinating. She'd grown up in the Silver Paw Pack, raised on stories of how wolves hunted, the feints, the flanking maneuvers, the way they could communicate without sound. Her sister Leanna had loved those stories, acting them out with the other pack children, while Rhea watched from the shadows. Too weak to join, too worthless to matter. A thunderous impact shook the eastern wall. Rhea stumbled backward, catching herself on the table that dominated the cabin's single room. The oil lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows that looked like claws reaching across the walls. Another impact, harder this time. The logs that formed the wall held, but she could see them shift, could hear the ancient mud chinking crumble and fall. They were testing her defenses. Think, 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 she whispered to herself, a habit from childhood when words were her only companions. The cabin was small, barely 15 feet square, with 1 door, 2 windows, and a stone fireplace that hadn't held a proper fire in weeks. She'd been rationing firewood, making her monthly allotment last, knowing that once it ran out, she'd have to venture into the forest, into pack territory, into the lands where exiled omegas were killed on sight. The council had been very clear about that. You are hereby banished from Silver Paw Pack for crimes against the natural order, Elder Marana had intoned, her voice carrying across the judgment circle, while Rhea knelt in the center. Head bowed, pack bond severed. You will receive sufficient supplies to survive 1 year in exile. After that, your fate is your own concern. Should you return, should you seek sanctuary with any allied pack, you will be executed. This is our mercy. Mercy. Rhea almost laughed at the memory. They'd given her this cabin 3 hours' walk from the nearest pack border, situated in a dead zone where the land belonged to no one because no one wanted it. They'd given her tools, basic supplies, enough food to last 6 months if she was careful. They'd even given her the suppressants, those bitter pills that kept her omega nature locked away, kept her from going into heat and attracting every unmated wolf within 50 miles. What they hadn't given her was a choice, another impact, this time on the door itself. The chair legs scraped across the floor. Rhea grabbed it, adding her weight to the barricade, but she knew it was futile. The door was old, the hinges rusted. It had been designed to keep out wind and rain, not a hunting pack. Through the window, a shadow moved. Large, larger than any wolf should be. Rhea's breath caught as she glimpsed its outline against the snow. A massive creature, easily twice the size of the others, its fur so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. As she watched, it turned its head toward the window, and for one impossible moment, their eyes met. Gold, pure molten gold, burning with an intelligence that made her wolf that suppressed, beaten down part of her whimper in recognition. Alpha. The thought came unbidden, instinctive, terrifying. But that was impossible. The nearest Alpha territory was a week's travel south, and no Alpha would brave this blizzard just to hunt a worthless Omega. No Alpha would even know she existed. The golden eyes held hers for another heartbeat, then the creature turned away, disappearing into the white chaos of the storm. The scratching resumed, but different now. Not testing, coordinating. She could hear them moving around the cabin, spreading out, finding positions. They were going to breach from multiple points simultaneously, overwhelm her defenses before she could react. Ria's mind raced. The windows were too small to escape through. The fireplace led to a chimney barely wide enough for a child. The floor was solid earth covered in rough planks. She had a hunting knife, a hatchet for splitting wood, and a rusted iron poker for the fire. Against 30 wolves, she had nothing. 31, her mind corrected, remembering those golden eyes. Her gaze fell on the trapdoor. She'd discovered it 2 months into her exile, hidden under a pile of rotting furs in the corner. The previous occupant, whoever had lived here before the cabin was claimed by the pack for exile purposes, had dug a root cellar, 6 feet deep, 4 feet square, accessed by a ladder of questionable stability. She'd been using it to store the vegetables she'd managed to coax from the rocky soil during the brief summer. Carrots, potatoes, turnips. Food to supplement the dwindling supplies from the pack. It wasn't a solution. It was a coffin, but it was the only option she had. The door splintered. Not broken, not yet, but she could see cracks forming in the aged wood. The scratching had become pounding, multiple impacts in a rhythm that spoke of coordinated effort. They'd break through in minutes, maybe less. Ria grabbed the oil lamp with shaking hands and moved to the corner. She kicked aside the remaining furs and hauled open the trapdoor, wincing as the hinges shrieked. The ladder descended into absolute darkness, into cold so deep it made the cabin feel warm by comparison. She could store food down there because it was essentially a natural refrigerator, the earth frozen solid for most of the year. She could also freeze to death down there in less than an hour. The door cracked audibly. The chair toppled. Through the opening, she could see them, gray shapes moving with liquid grace, muscled shoulders pressing against the door, intelligent eyes gleaming in the lamplight. Ria descended. The ladder groaned under her weight, ice-slicked rungs threatening to send her plummeting the final 4 feet. She made it to the bottom, feet landing in 2 inches of frozen slush, and looked up at the square of lamplight above. The cabin looked different from down here. Smaller, more fragile. A child's toy that the wolves would demolish in seconds. She reached up and pulled the trapdoor closed, just as the cabin door exploded inward. The darkness was absolute. Ria stood in the center of the root cellar, listening to the chaos above. The thunder of paws on wooden planks, the crash of furniture being overturned, the sharp yips and growls of wolves communicating. They were searching, hunting. And they would find the trapdoor eventually. Her breath came in short gasps that crystallized in the frigid air. The suppressants were definitely wearing off now. She could feel her wolf rising, clawing at the chemical chains that bound it. Heat bloomed in her core, that terrible Omega biology asserting itself at the worst possible moment. In an hour, maybe 2, she'd go into full heat. In this enclosed space, with 30 wolves above, it would be like ringing a dinner bell. Something heavy landed on the trapdoor. Ria pressed herself against the earthen wall, knife clutched in her hand though she knew it was useless. The weight shifted, moved, sniffing. She could hear it through the wood, great huffing breaths as the creature sought her scent. Then, impossibly, a voice. Open the door. Not a growl shaped into words, not the rough approximation of human speech that wolves in their animal form could sometimes manage. This was a man's voice, deep, commanding, with an edge that made her wolf want to simultaneously submit and fight. Ria's throat closed. Wolves could speak in human form, of course, but shifting during a hunt was inefficient, energy-intensive. No wolf would shift in the middle of a blizzard just to give orders to prey, unless the prey wasn't prey at all. I know you're down there, Omega. I can smell your fear. I can hear your heartbeat. And very soon, I'll be able to scent something else entirely. A pause, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Your suppressants are failing. You have perhaps 90 minutes before every wolf in this territory knows exactly what you are and where you are. So I'll ask again. Open the door. Go to hell, Rhea whispered, surprising herself. 5 years of silence, of obedience, of accepting every punishment and humiliation the pack had dealt her, and now, facing death, she found her voice. Laughter rumbled above, rich and genuine. There's the spirit. I was beginning to think the council had broken you completely. The weight shifted again. My name is Kale Nightfang, Alpha of the Northern Territories. And you, little Omega, are standing in what used to be my grandmother's hunting cabin. Rhea's mind reeled. The Northern Territories were legend, the largest pack in the continent, stretching from the Ice Mountains to the Blackwater River. They were warriors, conquerors, the pack that other packs paid tribute to just to avoid their wrath. And their alpha was supposedly a monster, 7 feet tall, scarred from countless battles, ruthless enough to kill his own father for the throne. That alpha was standing on her trapdoor. I don't believe you, she said, hating how her voice shook. The Alpha King doesn't hunt Omegas in blizzards. You're right, I don't. Another pause. Usually, the trapdoor lifted an inch, and lamplight spilled into her hiding place. Rhea raised her knife, knowing it was futile but unable to stop herself. Through the gap, she could see a hand, large, scarred, distinctly human, gripping the edge of the trapdoor. I'm going to open this door, Kale said, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. You're going to put down that knife, and then we're going to have a conversation about why the Silverpaw Pack exiled their last Omega to a cabin they had no right to claim. Does that sound reasonable? No. Good. I hate reasonable. The trapdoor swung open fully, flooding the cellar with light. Rhea looked up into the face of her doom and found, impossibly, a man. Not a monster. Not a beast. Just a man mid-30s, with dark hair that fell past his shoulders, a jaw shadowed with stubble, and those eyes, those impossible golden eyes that held her gaze with an intensity that made her wolf whimper. He was shirtless despite the cold, his torso a map of scars that told stories of battles won and losses survived. Tribal tattoos marked his shoulders and chest, ancient pack symbols that declared his lineage to anyone who could read them, and he was looking at her not with hunger or contempt, but with something that looked dangerously close to curiosity. Hello, Rhea, he said softly. The council made a serious mistake when they sent you here, and now we're both going to pay for it. Behind him, 29 wolves filled her tiny cabin, their eyes reflecting the lamplight like stars, waiting, watching, ready to tear her apart on their alpha's command. Rhea tightened her grip on the knife, felt her wolf rising despite the suppressants, despite the fear, despite every rational thought screaming at her to submit. If you're going to kill me, she said, just do it. I won't beg. Kale smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to devastating. Kill you? Little Omega, I didn't travel 3 days through a blizzard to kill you. He extended his hand down into the cellar, an offer and a challenge. I came to make you a queen. Chapter 2. The Alpha's Offer. Rhea stared at the extended hand, like it was a serpent ready to strike. A queen. He'd said queen. As if exile and terror and 30 wolves surrounding her cabin could somehow transform into a fairy tale with those simple words. As if an Alpha King would risk his life in a blizzard for a worthless Omega who'd been thrown away like spoiled meat. You're insane, she whispered. Kale's smile didn't waver. Frequently accused, never proven. He kept his hand extended, patient as stone. The floor is frozen earth. You're wearing nothing but a thin nightdress, and your body temperature is dropping by the minute. Pride is admirable, Rhea, but hypothermia is simply stupid. He was right, damn him. She could barely feel her feet anymore, and her fingers had gone from painful to numb around the knife handle. The cellar was a meat locker, designed to preserve food through temperature alone. It would preserve her corpse just as efficiently. If I take your hand, she said slowly, your wolves will kill me the moment I surface. If they were going to kill you, they'd have done it already. Kale's golden eyes held hers. My pack doesn't hunt without my command, and I don't make offers. I don't intend to honor. You have my word as Alpha. The word of a man who claims I'm standing in his grandmother's cabin, a cabin the Silverpaw Council swore was theirs to grant. Something dark flickered across Kale's face, There and gone so quickly she almost missed it. Yes, that's precisely the problem, isn't it? He shifted his weight, and she could see the wolves behind him respond, a subtle repositioning that spoke of pack coordination so ingrained it was instinctive. The Silverpaw pack has been encroaching on Northern Territory borders for 3 years. Small things at first, hunting parties that accidentally crossed the river. Territorial markers moved in the night. Cabins built on disputed land. My counsel advised patience, diplomacy, the avoidance of war. Ria's mind raced. She'd heard nothing of border disputes during her time in the pack. But then again, she'd been kept deliberately ignorant. Omegas weren't told pack business. They were told to be quiet, be obedient, be grateful they were allowed to exist at all. And then, Cale continued, his voice dropping to something colder. 3 months ago, my scouts reported that Silverpaw had exiled someone to this cabin, not to neutral territory, not to unclaimed lands, to a structure built by my great-grandfather in 1847, used by my grandmother until her death in 1923, and legally registered with the Continental Pack Council as Northern Territory property. His eyes narrowed. They sent you here as a statement, a challenge, an insult wrapped in the pretense of mercy. I didn't know. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. The council said they told me this was neutral ground, that no pack would bother me here as long as I stayed isolated. Of course they did. Cale's voice gentled slightly. You were a pawn, Ria, a worthless Omega, their words, not mine, thrown onto my land to force my hand. Either I ignore the transgression and appear weak, or I kill you and give them justification to call for continental intervention against northern aggression. He tilted his head. Quite clever, really. Elder Marana always did have a talent for vicious politics. The mention of Marana's name sent ice through Ria's veins that had nothing to do with the temperature. The elder had orchestrated her exile personally, had stood before the pack, and listed Ria's crimes with the relish of someone who'd been waiting years for the opportunity. And the primary crime? Existing. Being born Omega when the pack had wanted an alpha heir. Being weak when they demanded strength. Being herself when they wanted anyone else. So you came here to what? Ria heard the bitterness in her own voice. Prove a point? Start a war? Kill me in some political maneuver I'm too stupid to understand? No. Cale leaned forward slightly, and she caught his scent for the first time, pine and snow, and something wild that made her wolf keen with recognition. I came here because 3 days ago, during the full moon, I had a vision. The moon goddess herself appeared to me, and said that my mate, my true mate, was dying alone in my grandmother's cabin. His expression turned rueful. She was quite insistent I do something about it. The knife fell from Ria's numb fingers. Mate. True mate. The words every wolf grew up hearing, the fairy tale that sustained them through the worst of pack politics and hierarchy struggles. Somewhere in the world was another wolf whose soul matched yours perfectly, whose scent would call to your wolf like coming home, whose bond would be unbreakable by anything except death itself. Ria had stopped believing in true mates the day her sister Lyanna found hers a strong beta from an allied pack, and Ria had been forced to watch the mating ceremony from the servants' quarters, because her presence would lower the dignity of the occasion. You're lying, she said flatly. True mates can scent each other the moment they meet. I don't. I can't. But even as she protested, her wolf was howling, straining against the suppressants with renewed fury, could smell him, wanted him, needed him with an intensity that terrified her. You're on suppressants strong enough to sedate a bear. Cale's voice was patient, explanatory. They don't just hide your Omega scent from others, they blind you to your own instincts. But they're wearing off now, aren't they? You can feel it happening. And in about 75 minutes, when they fail completely, you're going to scent what I've been smelling since the moment I arrived. He paused. Home. Safety. Mine. Ria pressed her back against the earthen wall, wishing she could melt into it. Disappear. Wake up from this nightmare. This doesn't make sense. The moon goddess doesn't, she wouldn't. Her voice cracked. Why would she waste a true mate bond on someone like me? Someone like you? Cale's eyebrows rose. You mean someone who survived 5 years of exile that should have killed you in 5 months? Someone who taught herself to hunt and farm and build shelter with no pack support? Someone who just told the Alpha King of the Northern Territories to go to hell while trapped in a cellar with a kitchen knife? His smile returned, warmer this time. Rhea, the moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. If she chose you as my mate, it's because you're exactly what I need. You need a political disaster, Rhea shot back. That's what I am. An exiled Omega with no pack, no family, no value. If you claim me as your mate, Silverpaw will do absolutely nothing. The temperature in Kale's voice dropped 20 degrees. Because if they so much as whisper a protest, I will remind them that they exiled my mate to my territory without permission, a violation of continental law severe enough to justify complete pack dissolution. He straightened slightly. I've been looking for an excuse to deal with their council for 3 years. They've just handed me the perfect one. Above them, the wolves shifted restlessly. Rhea could hear their breathing, could feel their attention focused on the cellar like a physical weight. They were waiting for their alpha's signal, ready to act on his command. And she was the trigger. Accept his hand and live, refuse and… What? He'd said he wouldn't kill her, but he'd also said his pack hunted on his command. Wordplay, political maneuvering, the kind of games she'd never been taught because Omegas weren't supposed to need strategy. You said you'd make me a queen, she said carefully. Queens have power, authority. They make decisions that affect entire packs. Why would you give that to someone you've known for 5 minutes? Because, Kale said, and something in his voice made her look up into those golden eyes. I don't need a decorative mate who smiles and obeys and never questions my decisions. I have enough sycophants in my court. What I need, what the Northern Territories needs, is a queen who understands suffering, who knows what it's like to be discarded and dismissed, who will fight for the weak because she was weak herself once. He tilted his head. The moon goddess showed me your memories, Rhea. I know what they did to you, how they treated you, what your sister said at your exile trial. Rhea's breath caught. Liana's testimony had been the final blow, the moment when exile became inevitable. Her own sister, her litter mate, standing before the council and declaring that Rhea was a genetic aberration, a weak link that threatened the pack's future prosperity. She'd said it with tears in her eyes, with obvious regret, but she'd said it. And the council had listened. So you pity me, Rhea whispered. That's what this is, pity dressed up as destiny. I respect you, Kale corrected firmly. There's a difference. Pity is what you give to someone who's broken. Respect is what you give to someone who broke and put themselves back together stronger than before. He leaned forward again, close enough that she could see the faint scars on his jaw, the laugh lines around his eyes. You don't have to love me, Rhea. You don't even have to like me. But I am offering you a choice that no one has given you in 5 years. Come with me willingly, as my mate and future queen, with all the power and protection that entails. Or stay here, and I'll leave supplies and wolves enough to protect this cabin until the blizzard passes and you can make your own way in the world. It was a trap. It had to be. No one offered choices without strings attached, without hidden costs that would reveal themselves later. But his eyes held hers steadily, and she couldn't detect any deception in them. Just certainty, confidence, the absolute conviction of an alpha who'd made a decision and would see it through regardless of opposition. If I refuse, Rhea said slowly, you'll really leave? No punishment? No forced bond? I'll really leave. Kale's expression turned serious. Mate bonds can't be forced, Rhea. They're gifts from the moon goddess, not weapons. If you reject me, it will hurt both of us, but I won't die from it, and neither will you. You'll simply continue your life, and I'll continue mine, and we'll both wonder what might have been. And if I accept? She hated how small her voice sounded. Then you come with me to the northern capital. We complete the mating bond under the full moon, following traditional ceremonies. You become Queen of the Northern Territories, with all the rights and responsibilities that title carries. You'll have a voice in pack decisions, authority over pack members, and the power to enact changes as you see fit. He paused. You'll also have enemies. The pack will test you. Some will resent an Omega Queen. Some will see you as weak and try to exploit that. It won't be easy. As opposed to freezing to death in a cellar? Rhea laughed, a brittle sound that echoed off the earthen walls. At least your way comes with central heating. Kale's smile was sudden and genuine. There's that spirit again. I was hoping you hadn't lost it entirely. He waggled his fingers. Time's running out, little Omega. Your teeth are chattering, and I can see your lips turning blue. Make your choice. Rhea looked at his hand, scarred, strong, steady, and then up at his face. He was handsome in a brutal way, all sharp angles and hard lines softened only by those golden eyes. He was also an alpha king, which meant he was dangerous, unpredictable, and likely just as political as the council that had exiled her. Trusting him was stupid. Suicidal, even. But staying here was guaranteed death. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the suppressants and the fear and 5 years of learned helplessness, her wolf was howling one word over and over. Mine, mine, mine. Rhea reached up and took his hand. His skin was warm, shockingly warm, like touching a furnace after hours in the cold. His fingers closed around hers gently, carefully, as if she were made of glass. And then he was pulling her up, lifting her out of the cellar with effortless strength that reminded her exactly what he was. Predator, warrior, alpha. She emerged into chaos. Her cabin was destroyed. The door hung from one hinge, snow drifting through the opening to pile against overturned furniture. The table was splintered, the chairs reduced to kindling. The shelves had been torn from the walls, their meager contents scattered across the floor. And everywhere on every surface, in every corner were wolves. They were massive, far larger than any wolf should be, their eyes gleaming with intelligence that was distinctly human. Pack wolves, warriors, and they were all looking at her with expressions she couldn't read. Curiosity, calculation, something that might have been respect or might have been hunger. Rhea's legs wobbled. Kale caught her easily, one arm sliding around her waist to steady her. His scent enveloped her, that pine and snow and wildness, and her wolf practically purred. Easy, he murmured. You've been in the cold too long. Your body is in shock. He looked up at the wolves. Shift, now. Our queen needs to see faces, not fangs. The transformation was instantaneous and eerie in its synchronization. 29 wolves became 29 men and women. All of them tall and strong and marked with the same tribal tattoos as their alpha. They were naked, shifting destroyed clothes, but none of them seemed bothered by it. Pack wolves were comfortable with nudity in a way that always made Rhea uncomfortable. A reminder of how separate she'd always been from pack culture. A woman stepped forward mid-20s, with silver blonde hair cropped short and scars crossing her shoulders like badges of honor. Alpha, the blizzard is worsening. We need to move soon or risk being trapped here for days. Agreed. Kale looked down at Rhea. Can you walk? I can run, if I have to, she lied. Her feet were blocks of ice, and her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Kale's expression suggested he didn't believe her for a second. We'll take it slow, Seraphine. He gestured to the blonde woman. Give our queen your cloak, and someone find her boots. She's not walking barefoot through a blizzard. The pack moved with efficient precision. Within seconds, Rhea found herself wrapped in a fur-lined cloak that smelled of wolf and wilderness, with leather boots being laced onto her frozen feet by a grizzled man who handled her as gently as if she were a child. It was surreal, overwhelming. These were Northern Territory wolves, legendary warriors, and they were dressing her like servants attending royalty. I don't understand, she whispered, as Kale swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the ruined door. Why are you? You're my mate, Kale said simply. That makes you their queen, and in the Northern Territories, we protect what's ours. He stepped out into the blizzard, into wind that shrieked and snow that struck like tiny knives. Hold on to me, Rhea. We have a long journey ahead, and I need you conscious for all of it. Rhea buried her face against his chest, feeling his heart beat steady and strong beneath her cheek. Behind them, the pack fell into formation, warriors, surrounding their alpha and his mate, shields against the storm, and anything else that might threaten them. And as consciousness began to slip away, warm and safe for the first time in 5 years, Rhea heard Kale's voice rumbling through his chest. Sleep, little Omega. When you wake, everything changes. Please. Don't forget to subscribe. Chapter 3. The Northern Capital. Rhea woke to silk. Not the rough homespun blankets she'd grown accustomed to during exile. Not the threadbare sheets from her childhood in the Silverpaw servants' quarters. This was genuine silk, smooth as water, cool against her skin, expensive enough that a single pillowcase could have bought her a month's worth of food. She sat up slowly, disoriented. The room around her was vast, easily 10 times larger than her entire cabin. Vaulted ceilings arched overhead, painted with constellations that seemed to move in the flickering firelight. The walls were stone, but decorated with tapestries depicting wolf hunts and ancient battles. A fireplace large enough to stand in crackled with flames that cast dancing shadows across furniture that belonged in a museum. Hand-carved chairs, a writing desk inlaid with mother-of-pearl, wardrobes that could have hidden entire families. This wasn't a room. It was a statement of power. You're awake. Good. Rhea jerked her head toward the voice. Seraphine, the blonde warrior from the cabin, stood by the window, backlit by morning sun that streamed through glass so clear it must have cost a fortune. She'd changed from her nakedness into leather armor that molded to her body like a second skin, with twin daggers strapped to her thighs and a sword across her back. Where? Rhea's voice came out as a croak. She cleared her throat and tried again. Where am I? The northern capital. Alpha's private quarters. Seraphine moved away from the window with the fluid grace of a predator. You've been unconscious for 18 hours. Hypothermia, shock, and suppressor withdrawal. The pack healer wanted to keep you sedated longer, but the Alpha insisted you be awake for the council meeting. Rhea's mind struggled to process the information. 18 hours. She'd lost almost a full day. The blizzard, the journey. Kale's promise to make her queen at all felt like a fever dream. Something her desperate mind had conjured while freezing to death in that cellar. This is real, she whispered. Unfortunately. Seraphine's tone was dry. The Alpha has spent those 18 hours in council meetings, dealing with the political nightmare your existence has created. Silverpaw has sent 3 separate delegations demanding your return. The Continental Council is expressing concern about potential territorial disputes, and half the Northern Council is questioning whether an exiled Omega is suitable as queen. She tilted her head. You've managed to destabilize an entire region without even being conscious. Impressive. The words hit like physical blows. Rhea had known, of course. She'd known that accepting Kale's offer would have consequences. But hearing them laid out so bluntly made her chest tighten with familiar anxiety. She was a problem, a burden, a worthless Omega, causing trouble for people who'd been kind enough to rescue her. I should leave. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. If I'm causing this much, don't. Seraphine's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare finish that sentence. I didn't spend 18 hours in a blizzard, carrying your half-frozen body across 3 mountain ranges, just to watch you run away because things got complicated. She crossed her arms. The Alpha chose you. The moon goddess chose you. That makes you pack, which means you don't get to quit just because it's hard. Rhea stared at her, shocked by the vehemence. Seraphine stared back, her gray eyes hard as stone. I don't understand, Rhea said finally. You don't even know me. Why would you? Because the Alpha trusts you. And I trust the Alpha. Seraphine's expression softened slightly. And because I've read your file. Do you know what the Silverpaw Council said about you in their official exile documentation? They called you genetically defective, socially incompetent, and fundamentally unsuited for pack integration. They exiled you for the crime of being born Omega, in a pack that only values strength. She paused. I was born a runt, smallest pup in my litter. My birth pack wanted to kill me for dragging down the collective strength. The Alpha King found me when I was 6, half-starved and living in the woods, and brought me here, made me pack, trained me personally. Her smile was sharp. Now I'm captain of the Queen's Guard. So forgive me if I have strong opinions about Omegas who think they're not worth protecting. The Queen's Guard. Rhea's mind latched onto the words. There is no queen. We haven't. The mating bond isn't complete. Details. Seraphine waved dismissively. The Alpha declared you his mate. That's enough for pack law. The ceremonial bonding just makes it official. She moved to one of the massive wardrobes and threw it open, revealing rows of dresses in every color imaginable. Now, get up. You have exactly 90 minutes before the council meeting, and you need to look like a queen, not a half-drowned refugee. Rhea looked down at herself for the first time. Someone had changed her clothes while she slept. She now wore a nightgown of such fine material. It was nearly transparent, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that depicted running wolves. Her skin was clean, her hair no longer matted with ice and dirt. They'd bathed her, cared for her, treated her like she mattered. The kindness made her want to cry. "I don't know how to be a queen," she whispered. Neither did the last 3 queens, and they managed just fine. Seraphine pulled out a dress, deep green velvet with silver embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Being queen isn't about knowing everything. It's about making decisions and standing by them. The alpha will handle politics. You handle being you. She paused, studying Rhea with an expression that might have been sympathy. He chose you for a reason, you know. Trust that, even if you don't trust yourself yet. Before Rhea could respond, the door burst open. 3 women swept in like a small tornado. One tall and angular with hair like midnight, one short and curvy with copper curls, and one middle-aged with silver streaking her brown locks. They wore the same leather armor as Seraphine, marked with insignias that Rhea didn't recognize. Finally, the tall one declared, "Seraphine, you've been hogging the new queen for 18 hours. We demand introduction rights." "I haven't been hogging anything, Vera." She was unconscious. Semantics. The copper-haired one approached Rhea with a grin that revealed slightly pointed canines. "I'm Isla, 2nd of the Queen's Guard. That's Vera, 3rd. And the distinguished lady trying to pretend she's not crying is Margot, our healer and entirely too emotional for a warrior." "I'm not crying," Margot protested, dabbing at her eyes. It's been 15 years since we had a queen. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have balance in the pack." Rhea felt overwhelmed by their energy, their acceptance, their assumption that she belonged here. I haven't agreed to anything yet," the alpha offered, but nothing. Vera plopped down on the bed beside Rhea, with complete disregard for personal space. "Look, I'm going to be blunt because that's who I am. The Alpha King is the strongest wolf in 5 territories. He's brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and completely dedicated to pack welfare. He's also been alone for 28 years, watching his parents' toxic mate bond destroy them both, convinced he'd never find his true mate because the moon goddess had written him off as unworthy." She leaned closer. "Then he has a vision, a direct message from the goddess herself, saying his mate is dying in a blizzard, and he drops everything, postpones 3 territorial negotiations, cancels a continental council meeting, and drags half his elite guard into the worst storm in 50 years to rescue you." "Vera," Seraphine warned. "No, she needs to hear this." Vera's blue eyes were fierce. "You think you're worthless, Rhea. I can see it in every nervous gesture, every self-deprecating word. The Silver Paw Pack spent years convincing you that being Omega made you less than nothing. But here's the truth. The Alpha King doesn't rescue nothing. He doesn't make nobodies his mate. He doesn't restructure his entire political calendar for someone he doesn't value." She gripped Rhea's hand. "You are his true mate. That makes you the most important person in this territory. And if you run because you don't think you're good enough, you'll be proving Silverpaw right." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Rhea wanted to argue, to list all the reasons why this was a mistake, why she'd only bring Kale trouble and disappointment. But Vera's grip on her hand was solid, real, and the 3 other women were watching her with expressions that ranged from hope to determination to fierce protectiveness. They believed in her. Strangers who'd known her for less than a day, who'd carried her broken body through a blizzard, who were now standing in her room declaring she was worthy of being queen. "I don't know what to do," Rhea admitted quietly. "Start by getting dressed." Isla held up the green velvet dress. "Then you go to the council meeting, sit beside the alpha, and let everyone see that you're not going anywhere. Everything else, we figure out as we go. What if I mess up? Say something wrong? Then you mess up." Margot's voice was gentle. "Queens are allowed to be imperfect, Rhea. The last queen once accidentally declared war on our own allied pack because she misread a treaty document. The Alpha King fixed it in 3 hours, and everyone moved on." She smiled. You're not expected to be perfect. Just present. Present. Rhea could do present. She'd spent 5 years being invisible, being silent, being nothing. Being seen, being acknowledged might actually be the easier option. Okay, she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Show me what to do. The next 90 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Isla and Vera helped her into the green dress, which fit perfectly, despite no one taking measurements. Margot did something complicated with her hair, braiding it with silver thread that caught the light like starfire. Seraphine taught her basic council meeting etiquette: when to speak, when to stay silent, how to read the pack hierarchy through seating arrangements. The most important thing, Seraphine emphasized as she fastened a silver cloak around Rhea's shoulders, is to never show fear. The council will test you. They'll ask invasive questions, make subtle jabs, try to determine if you're worthy of the Alpha's attention. Don't give them ammunition. What if they ask about my exile? About why Silverpaw rejected me? Tell the truth. Seraphine's gray eyes met hers. The Northern Territories respects honesty above all else. If they ask why you were exiled, tell them exactly what happened. The pack will make their own judgment about whether Silverpaw's council made the right choice. A knock sounded at the door. All 4 women straightened instantly, hands moving to weapons in unconscious synchronization. Rhea realized with a start that they'd been guarding her, not just helping her dress. These weren't servants. They were warriors who'd been assigned to protect her life. Enter, Seraphine called. The door opened to reveal a young man barely 20, with the same golden eyes as Kyle but a softer face. He wore formal robes marked with symbols Rhea didn't recognize, and he bowed so deeply his forehead nearly touched his knees. My queen, he said formally. The Alpha King requests your presence in the Great Hall. The council awaits. My queen. The title made Rhea's stomach twist. She wasn't a queen. She was a terrified Omega playing dress-up in borrowed clothes, about to walk into a room full of wolves who would see through her pretense in seconds. Seraphine's hand landed on her shoulder, firm, steady, grounding. You can do this. We'll be right behind you. Rhea took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and nodded to the young messenger. Lead the way. The walk through the palace was deliberately intimidating. Corridors stretched endlessly, lined with portraits of previous Alpha Kings and Queens, their painted eyes following her progress. Guards stood at every intersection, massive warriors in ceremonial armor who bowed as she passed. Windows revealed a capital city sprawling below, stone buildings with slate roofs, market squares bustling with activity, walls that stretched for miles to keep threats at bay. This was power. This was legacy. This was everything Rhea had never been allowed to touch. They reached a set of doors so large they required 4 guards to open them. Beyond, Rhea could hear voices, dozens of them, arguing in that particular cadence that suggested political debate. The Great Hall, the Council, her future, waiting to judge whether she was worthy of it. The young messenger turned to her, his golden eyes kind. For what it's worth, my queen. I believe the goddess chose well. My brother needs someone who understands pain. He smiled. Give them hell. Then the doors swung open, and Rhea stepped into chaos. The Great Hall was circular, with a domed ceiling painted to resemble the night sky. Tiered seating rose in concentric circles, filled with wolves whose attention snapped to her the moment she appeared. At the center, on a raised dais carved from a single piece of black stone, sat Kale. He wore robes of midnight blue, embroidered with silver wolves that seemed to move in the torchlight. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp lines of his face and those golden eyes that found hers across the distance. He wasn't smiling, but something in his expression softened when he saw her. Counselors, his voice rang out, silencing the room instantly. I present Rhea, of Silverpaw, my true mate, and your future queen. She stands before you not as an exile seeking sanctuary, but as the one chosen by the moon goddess herself to lead beside me. He extended his hand toward her, an echo of that moment in the cellar. Approach, my mate. Let the council see what the goddess has blessed us with. Every eye in the room locked onto Rhea, hundreds of wolves, ranging from young warriors to ancient elders, all watching to see if she would falter, if she would run, if she would prove herself unworthy of the honor being offered. Rhea thought of her cabin, of 5 years alone, of every moment she'd been told she was worthless. She thought of Seraphine's words, "The Alpha King doesn't rescue nothing." She walked forward, head high, and took Kale's hand. The room erupted. Chapter 4. The Trial of Worthiness. The eruption wasn't celebration. Half the council rose to their feet in protest, voices overlapping in a cacophony of outrage and disbelief. The other half remained seated, watching with calculating eyes that made Rhea's skin crawl. Kale's hand tightened around hers, not painfully, but enough to communicate. "I've got you. Stand firm." Silence. The word cracked through the hall like thunder. Kale hadn't shouted, his voice had simply carried that particular alpha resonance that made every wolf in the room instinctively submit. The noise cut off, as if someone had severed a cord. Even Rhea felt the pull of his command, her wolf pressing low in automatic deference. "You will show respect to your queen," Kale continued, his tone deadly calm. "Or you will leave this council and explain to your packs why you chose to insult a mate bond blessed by the moon goddess herself." An elderly man stood from the front row, white-haired, scarred, with eyes that had seen too many battles. "With respect, Alpha King, we question not the moon goddess's wisdom, but the circumstances. This woman was exiled by her birth pack for crimes unspecified. She has lived in isolation, untested by pack dynamics, unproven in her loyalties. How can we trust her to guide our people?" "Counselor Thaddeus," Kale's voice remained level. "You were exiled from your birth pack at age 16 for killing your alpha's son in an honor duel. Yet you now sit on my council as one of my most trusted advisors. Explain to me how your exile was more honorable than hers." Thaddeus's jaw tightened. "I killed a rapist who attacked my sister. The Continental Council recognized my actions as justified and facilitated my transfer to Northern Territory. It is hardly the same situation, isn't it?" Kale gestured to Rhea. "You're right that we don't know the circumstances of her exile. So why don't we ask her?" He looked down at Rhea, his golden eyes gentle despite the tension crackling through the room. "Tell them. What crime did Silverpaw accuse you of?" Every wolf in the Great Hall leaned forward. Rhea could feel their attention like a physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders, stealing the air from her lungs. This was the moment Seraphine had warned her about the test, the trap, the chance to prove herself or condemn herself with her own words. She'd spent 5 years hiding. Maybe it was time to stop. "I was born Omega," Rhea said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded in the vast space. "My twin sister was born Alpha. The pack celebrated her birth and mourned mine. When we were children, they sent Liana to combat training and me to the kitchens. When we were teenagers, they gave her a seat on the youth council and forbade me from attending pack meetings. When we turned 20, they began searching for her mate among allied packs while warning me not to go into heat, because my inferior genetics might contaminate the pack bloodline." She felt Kale's hand tighten around hers again, but this time it felt like suppressed rage. She continued, "The crime they exiled me for was refusing a direct order from Elder Marana. She commanded me to take permanent sterilization drugs, not suppressants, but chemicals that would destroy my ability to ever bear children because she feared I might someday mate with a pack member and weaken the genetic pool. I said no. I said that the moon goddess gave me this body for a reason, and I wouldn't mutilate it because the pack saw me as defective." Rhea lifted her chin. 3 days later, I was exiled for disobedience, disrespect to authority, and genetic incompatibility with pack standards. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Thaddeus sat down, his face pale. "They wanted to sterilize you. For being Omega." "Yes." "And you refused." "Yes." Another counselor stood, a woman in her 50s with scars crossing her face like lightning. "What was your sister's response to this order?" The question hit like a knife between the ribs. Rhea had tried not to think about Liana's role in her exile, had tried to convince herself that her sister had been pressured, manipulated, forced into betrayal. But standing here, with hundreds of eyes watching, she couldn't hide behind comfortable lies. "Liana testified at my exile trial," Rhea said quietly. "She told the council that I was selfish for refusing sterilization. that my desire for personal autonomy threatened pack stability, that an Omega who couldn't obey simple orders was dangerous to everyone around her. She paused, swallowing against the tightness in her throat. She was my twin. We shared a womb. And she stood in front of the entire pack and called me a genetic aberration that needed to be removed for the greater good. Kale made a sound low in his chest, something between a growl and a snarl. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably. Rhea kept her gaze forward, refusing to show how much the memory still hurt. I have a question. A young woman stood from the upper tiers, maybe 30, with kind eyes and hands that bore the calluses of someone who worked with their hands. Forgive my bluntness, Queen Rhea, but you've spent 5 years in total isolation. You've never held a position of authority. You've never made decisions that affected anyone but yourself. What makes you qualified to guide the Northern Territories? It was a fair question, a reasonable question, and Rhea had absolutely no good answer for it. I'm not qualified, she admitted. I have no political training, no leadership experience, no understanding of how to manage a pack of this size. By every metric the council would use to judge a queen, I'm completely inadequate. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Kale's expression remained neutral, but she could feel him watching her, waiting to see where she'd take this. But I do understand something that I suspect many of you have forgotten, Rhea continued. I understand what it's like to be powerless. To have every choice made for you. To be told that your voice doesn't matter because of circumstances beyond your control. She met the young woman's eyes. I spent 5 years surviving in a cabin with minimal supplies, teaching myself skills no one bothered to teach me because they decided I wasn't worth the effort. I learned to hunt, to farm, to preserve food, to prepare for winters that would kill me if I made a single mistake. I did that alone, without a pack, without support, without anyone telling me I was capable. She paused. So no, I'm not qualified to be queen by traditional standards, but I'm very qualified to recognize when someone is being overlooked, dismissed, or treated as less than they are. And I think that perspective might be valuable in a position of power. The young woman smiled slightly and sat down. Pretty words. The voice came from the back male, dripping with contempt. But words are easy when there are no consequences. I propose a test. Kale's entire body went rigid. Counselor Victor, choose your next words carefully. A man emerged from the shadows of the upper tier, massive even by wolf standards, with a shaved head and tattoos that marked him as a warrior of the old traditions. His eyes, when they locked onto Rhea, held nothing but disdain. The Northern Territories has not had a queen in 15 years, Victor said, descending the steps with deliberate slowness. In that time, we have thrived. Our territory has expanded. Our strength has grown. Our reputation has become legend. Some of us question whether we need a queen at all, particularly one with no proven value to the pack. He reached the floor level and faced Kale directly. The old laws give council members the right to issue a trial of worthiness when the alpha chooses a mate deemed questionable. You dare, Kale's voice dropped to something lethal. I invoke my right under traditional law, established by your great-grandfather in 1847. Victor's smile was sharp. The alpha's mate must prove her worth through trial, combat, cleverness, or character her choice. Refuse, and the council can formally object to the mating bond. Rhea felt the temperature in the room plummet. Around them, counselors were shifting, whispering, some looking angry and others intrigued. Seraphine had moved to the edge of the dais, her hand on her sword hilt, but Kale held up a hand to stop her. The trial of worthiness was abolished 30 years ago, Kale said coldly. After my grandmother died in one. It was suspended, not abolished. The law remains on the books. Victor's eyes gleamed. Unless the Alpha King wishes to demonstrate that traditional laws no longer apply when they become inconvenient? It was a trap. Rhea could see it in the way other counselors were watching, calculating. Victor had just backed Kale into a corner, either allow the trial and risk losing Rhea, or refuse and appear to place his personal desires above pack law. Either way, his authority would be undermined. What are the terms? Rhea heard herself ask. Every head swiveled toward her. Kale's eyes widened. Rhea, no, you don't have to. What are the terms? She repeated, louder this time. She stepped forward, releasing Kale's hand, and faced Victor directly. You invoked traditional law. I'm accepting. State the terms of the trial of worthiness. Victor's smile widened. 3 challenges, 1 from each category. First, combat. You will face a council-appointed opponent in the sparring ring, not to death, but to submission or incapacitation. Second, cleverness. You will solve a puzzle of ancient origin, one that has stumped the council's best minds for decades. Third, character. You will make a choice that reveals your true nature under pressure. He tilted his head. Fail any trial, and you forfeit your claim to the position of queen. The alpha may keep you as mate, but you will have no authority, no voice in pack decisions, no power to affect Northern Territory policy. And if I succeed in all 3, then I will personally kneel before you and acknowledge you as my queen. Victor's tone suggested he thought that outcome was impossible. The trial begins tomorrow at dawn. I suggest you rest well, little Omega. You'll need your strength. He turned and strode from the great hall, leaving chaos in his wake. Counselors erupted into argument. Some were shouting that the trial was archaic and dangerous. Others were insisting that traditional law must be honored. Thaddeus was on his feet, demanding Victor's expulsion from the council. The woman with the scarred face was calling for an immediate vote on trial abolishment. Through it all, Kale stood frozen, staring at Rhea with an expression she couldn't read. I'm sorry, she whispered. But he would have used it against you. This way you could die. Kale's voice was rough. Do you understand what you just agreed to? The combat trial alone, they'll choose someone strong, fast, brutal, someone who wants to prove that an Omega has no place in pack leadership. They'll hurt you, Rhea, badly. Maybe. Rhea met his eyes. But if I'd refused, they would have seen me as weak. A coward hiding behind her mate's protection. I can't start my reign if I even get one by proving them right about me. Kale stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I haven't decided which. Can it be both? Usually is. He reached out and cupped her face with one hand, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. The gesture was intimate, possessive, and utterly inappropriate for the public setting. Rhea's wolf practically purred. You have 18 hours before the trial begins. We'll use every second to prepare you. Seraphine will handle combat training. My brother Finn, the messenger you met, is our cleverest puzzle solver, and I'll work with you on the character trial, though those are always unpredictable. What did your grandmother face? Rhea asked quietly. In her trial, Kale's expression darkened. Combat against 3 opponents simultaneously, a riddle in an ancient language she'd never studied, and a choice between saving my grandfather's life or protecting pack territory from invasion. He paused. She chose my grandfather. Half the pack saw it as weakness. The other half saw it as proof that she valued individuals over politics. The debate lasted months, and divided the territory so severely that it took years to repair the damage. She was poisoned 3 years later by someone who never believed she deserved the throne. Rhea's stomach twisted. And I just volunteered for the same treatment. Yes. Kale's thumb traced her jaw. But you'll have something she didn't. Me. I've been Alpha King for 10 years, and I've learned every political maneuver, every subtle manipulation, every way to turn disadvantage into strength. Victor thinks he's trapped you. He has no idea what you're capable of. I don't know what I'm capable of either, Rhea admitted. Then let's find out together. Kale pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers in a gesture that felt more intimate than a kiss. You took my hand in that cellar, Rhea. You trusted me then. Trust me now. Around them, the council continued arguing, but Rhea barely heard them. She was focused on Kale's heartbeat, steady and strong beneath her palm. On his scent, wild and safe and right. On the warmth of his skin against hers. 18 hours, she whispered. 18 hours, he confirmed. And then you show the Northern Territories exactly why the Moon Goddess chose you as their queen. Seraphine appeared at Rhea's elbow, her expression grim. We need to move. Victor supporters are already spreading rumors that the Omega accepted the trial because she's too stupid to understand the danger. We need to control the narrative. Agreed. Kale stepped back, instantly transforming from intimate mate to commanding alpha. Seraphine, take Rhea to the training yards. Start with basics, stance, balance, defensive positioning. Vera and Isla will assist. I want her able to hold her ground against a determined opponent, even if she can't win through strength alone. Understood. Seraphine gripped Rhea's arm. Come on, my queen. Time to learn how to make people regret underestimating you. As Rhea was led from the great hall, she caught one last glimpse of Kale. He'd turned to face the council, his expression cold and implacable, and she could hear his voice carrying through the chamber. Let me be very clear. The trial of worthiness will proceed according to traditional law, but any counselor who attempts to sabotage the trials, who rigs them in favor of failure, or who harms my mate beyond the acceptable bounds of the challenges, will answer to me personally, and I promise you my justice will be far less merciful than any trial. Then, the doors closed, and Rhea was swept into a whirlwind of preparation that would determine whether she lived to see her coronation, or died trying to prove she was worth saving. Chapter 5. Blood and Lessons. The training yard was a testament to Northern Territory brutality. Rhea stood at the edge of a circular arena carved from packed earth and bordered by stone seats that could hold hundreds of spectators. Weapons racks lined the perimeter: swords, spears, staffs, and implements she didn't have names for. The ground was stained dark in places, and she tried not to think about what had caused those stains. Stop looking at the bloodstains. Seraphine's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. They're from yesterday's sparring matches. No one died. Probably. Northern wolves heal fast. Seraphine stripped off her outer armor, revealing a fitted leather vest and pants that allowed for maximum mobility. Now strip. Rhea blinked. What? The dress. Off. You can't train in velvet and silk. Seraphine gestured impatiently. Don't be modest. There are only 5 of us here. And we're all women. Well, mostly women. A figure emerged from behind the weapons rack, a young man, maybe 17, with Kale's golden eyes and a grin that suggested he found this entire situation hilarious. Finn, Rhea realized, the messenger from earlier. The Alpha King sent me to observe, Finn said cheerfully. He wants detailed notes on your progress. Also, he thought having his brother present might discourage Seraphine from accidentally killing you. I never accidentally do anything, Seraphine muttered. And stop grinning like an idiot. This is serious. Rhea fumbled with the dress fastenings, her fingers clumsy with nerves. Isla appeared beside her, helping with the complicated clasps while Vera dragged over a trunk filled with training clothes. Here. Vera tossed her leather pants similar to Seraphine's. These should fit. We're about the same size, though you're skinnier. When's the last time you ate a proper meal? Yesterday? Rhea pulled on the pants, grateful for their warmth. I've been surviving on preserved vegetables and the occasional rabbit for 5 years. Proper meals weren't exactly an option. Well, that changes now. Margot emerged from a side entrance carrying a tray laden with meat, bread, and cheese. You need protein to build muscle. Can't fight on an empty stomach. I thought we were training, not eating. We're doing both. Seraphine accepted a chunk of bread from Margot and bit into it aggressively. Combat training burns massive calories. You'll eat, train, eat again, train more, eat a 3rd time, and probably collapse around midnight. Then we'll do it all again after 4 hours of sleep. Rhea stared at her. You're serious. Deadly serious. Victor chose combat as the first trial because he thinks you're weak, fragile, unable to withstand physical punishment. Seraphine's gray eyes were hard. We have 18 hours to prove him wrong. That means we don't sleep much, don't rest, and definitely don't give up just because your body is screaming. Understood? Understood. Rhea pulled on the vest Isla offered, then accepted a piece of meat from Margot. Her hands shook slightly, but she forced herself to eat. Seraphine was right, she couldn't afford weakness. Not now. Good. Seraphine moved to the center of the arena. Now, let's assess what we're working with. Rhea, come at me. Try to knock me down. Rhea set down her food and approached cautiously. Seraphine stood relaxed, hands at her sides, expression neutral. It was obviously a test, but Rhea had no idea what the correct response was. Rush in aggressively? Circle and look for openings? Wait for Seraphine to make the first move? She chose aggression. Rhea lunged forward, aiming a clumsy strike at Seraphine's midsection. The warrior moved, barely seemed to move at all, and suddenly Rhea was airborne. She hit the ground hard, all the air exploding from her lungs in a painful whoosh. Stars danced in her vision, too slow, too obvious, too committed. Seraphine's voice came from above. You telegraphed your intention 3 seconds before you moved. Any trained fighter would see it coming from a mile away. She offered her hand. Again, Rhea took the hand, was hauled to her feet, and immediately found herself thrown back down when she tried a different angle. Then again, and again. By the 10th attempt, she was bleeding from a split lip, and her entire body ached. But she was starting to see the pattern. Seraphine wasn't just throwing her, she was teaching her how to fall, how to roll, how to minimize damage when the impact was inevitable. Better, Seraphine said after the 15th throw. You're learning to protect your head. That's crucial. In combat, you will get hit. Accepting that fact is the first step to survival. How encouraging, Rhea gasped, spitting blood. I'm not here to encourage you. I'm here to keep you alive. Seraphine pulled her up again. Now, let's talk about your advantages. You're small, that's not a weakness. That's an asset. Smaller target, faster movements, harder to grab. You're also Omega, which means your wolf is naturally more agile than an alpha's. Alphas rely on power. Omegas rely on speed. I don't feel fast, Rhea said, rubbing her bruised ribs. That's because you've been on suppressants for 5 years. Margot approached with a water skin. Drink. The chemicals dull your reflexes. Suppress your wolf's instincts. Now that they're wearing off, you'll start noticing changes. Sharper senses. Quicker reactions. Better balance. She paused. Also, the heat symptoms will intensify. Be prepared for that. Rhea had been trying not to think about the heat. Already she could feel it building a warmth low in her belly. A hypersensitivity to scent. An awareness of Kale even though he was nowhere nearby. By the time the trial started tomorrow, she'd be in the early stages of full heat. Fighting while her body screamed for her mate would be problematic. Can we delay the heat? She asked. More suppressants or… No. Seraphine's voice was sharp. Suppressants would dull your reflexes further. You need every advantage you can get, even if that means dealing with distraction. Besides, she smiled slightly, Omegas in heat release pheromones that can affect opponents, make them hesitate, become distracted. It's not much, but we'll take any edge we can get. So, my plan is to seduce my opponent into submission? If that works, I won't judge your methods. Vera appeared with a practice staff. But we should probably have a backup plan. Here, Seraphine, catch. She tossed the staff. Seraphine caught it one-handed and immediately swung at Rhea's head. Rhea ducked on pure instinct, the staff whistling past her ear. She scrambled backward, heart hammering, and glared at Seraphine. A warning would be nice. Opponents don't give warnings. Seraphine spun the staff lazily. They attack when you're distracted, unprepared, vulnerable. Get used to it. She struck again, low this time. Rhea jumped, barely clearing the staff. Then Seraphine reversed direction, and Rhea had to roll sideways to avoid having her legs swept out from under her. The warrior pressed the attack, driving Rhea backward with a series of strikes that came faster and faster until Rhea caught the staff. She didn't know how she'd done it. One moment she was retreating, overwhelmed, certain she was about to get her skull cracked open. The next, her hand shot out and grabbed the staff mid-swing, her grip iron tight despite the impact that rattled her bones. Seraphine's eyes widened. Well, that's new. What just happened? Rhea stared at her own hand, shocked. Your wolf happened. Margot was grinning. Without suppressants, your instincts are returning. Your wolf saw the threat and reacted faster than your conscious mind could process. That's what we need to cultivate. Can I do it again? Only one way to find out. Seraphine yanked the staff free and tossed it to Vera. Vera, Isla, both of you, staffs. Let's see how our queen handles multiple opponents. The next hour was brutal. Rhea was knocked down more times than she could count. Struck across the ribs, the shoulders, the thighs. But she was also learning to read body language, to predict strikes, to move before her conscious mind caught up with her instincts. Her wolf was waking up, pushing through years of chemical suppression, and with it came abilities she'd never known she had. She could hear heartbeats, smell the sweat on Vera's brow before the woman even moved. See the subtle shift in Isla's weight that telegraphed which direction she'd attack from. It wasn't enough to win, she was still outmatched, still slower and weaker than trained warriors, but it was enough to survive, to last, to keep fighting even when her body screamed for rest. Enough. Seraphine called a halt as Rhea collapsed to her knees, gasping. Eat, rest for 10 minutes. Then we moved to defensive tactics. Rhea crawled to the edge of the arena, where Margot waited with more food and a healing salve for her bruises. Finn approached, his expression thoughtful. You're improving faster than I expected, he said quietly. Most wolves need weeks to reconnect with their instincts after long-term suppression. You're doing it in hours. Is that good or bad? Depends. Finn crouched beside her. It could mean your wolf is naturally strong, eager to break free. Or it could mean the bond with the alpha is accelerating your recovery. Mate bonds do that, strengthen both parties, enhance natural abilities. He paused. My brother told me to tell you something. He said, trust your wolf. She knows what you need, even when you don't. Rhea closed her eyes, feeling tears prick at the corners. She was exhausted, battered, terrified of what tomorrow would bring. But Kale believed in her. Seraphine believed in her. These warriors who barely knew her were spending their night teaching her to survive because they thought she was worth the effort. Maybe it was time to believe in herself. 10 minutes is up, Seraphine announced. Back in the ring. Time to learn what to do when someone twice your size gets you in a hold. The training continued. Hours blurred together, falling, rising, attacking, defending. Learning the hard way that combat wasn't about strength but about will. About refusing to stay down even when everything hurt. About finding angles, exploiting openings, using an opponent's momentum against them. Vera taught her pressure points, places to strike that would drop even an alpha if hit precisely. Isla showed her how to escape from holds, how to make herself slippery and difficult to grip. Margot worked on her stamina, pushing her to keep moving even when her lungs burned and her muscles screamed. And through it all, Seraphine drilled one message into her head. You will not win through strength. You will win through stubbornness. Outlast them. Make them question whether hurting you is worth the effort. Make them see that you will never surrender, never quit, never stop fighting. That's how Omegas survive in a world built for alphas. Midnight came and went. Rhea lost track of how many times she'd been thrown, struck, or knocked unconscious. Her body was one massive bruise, and she was fairly certain she'd cracked at least 2 ribs. But she was still standing. Still moving. Still fighting. Last drill, Seraphine said, as the clock tower chimed 2 a.m. Full combat. All 4 of us against you. You need to survive for 5 minutes without being pinned. Ready? Rhea wasn't ready. She'd never be ready. But she nodded anyway. They came at her from all sides, a coordinated assault that would have overwhelmed her 12 hours ago. But now, with her wolf fully awake and singing in her veins, she moved. Not gracefully, not powerfully, but effectively. She ducked under Vera's strike, rolled past Isla's grab, used Seraphine's own momentum to send her stumbling. Margot nearly caught her, but Rhea twisted free at the last second and put distance between herself and her attackers. 4 minutes. She could hear Finn counting from the sidelines. 4 minutes of chaos, of desperate survival, of refusing to go down even when Seraphine's staff caught her across the shoulders hard enough to make her vision white out. 3.5 minutes. Vera's fist connected with her ribs, the cracked ones, and Rhea tasted copper but kept moving. 3 minutes. Isla's leg swept hers out from under her, and she hit the ground hard but rolled immediately, preventing the pin. 2 minutes. Her vision was graying at the edges. 1 minute. She could barely breathe. 30 seconds. Seraphine had her by the arm, pulling her into a hold that would end the drill if Rhea couldn't break it. So Rhea bit her. Not hard enough to truly injure, just enough to shock. Seraphine's grip loosened from surprise, and Rhea wrenched free, stumbling backward as Finn shouted, "Time!" Silence fell over the training yard. Rhea stood in the center of the arena, swaying on her feet, bleeding from at least 5 different places. The 4 warriors surrounded her, and for a moment she was certain they'd condemn her for the bite, call it dishonorable, proof that she couldn't follow the rules of engagement. Then Seraphine started laughing. "You bit me," she said, disbelief and admiration mixing in her voice. "You actually bit me. Like a feral street wolf. You said to survive." Rhea managed through split lips. "You didn't say how." "No, I didn't." Seraphine's smile was fierce. "Well fought, my queen. You'll do." Vera whooped. Isla clapped. Margot rushed forward with healing supplies and more food, and Finn was grinning like he'd just witnessed something historic. "The Alpha's going to love this," he said. "Victor thinks he's sending you against a helpless Omega. He has no idea what's coming." Rhea collapsed to her knees, every muscle trembling. "I barely survived 5 minutes against you. How am I supposed to last against whoever they choose as my opponent?" "The same way you just did." Seraphine knelt beside her. "By refusing to quit. By fighting dirty when necessary. By being too stubborn to die." She gripped Rhea's shoulder. "You have 3 more hours before we need to work on the cleverness trial. I suggest you spend it sleeping. Margot will heal what she can, but some pain you'll have to carry into the arena. Can you handle that?" Rhea thought of 5 years alone. Of every humiliation, every rejection, every moment she'd been told she was worthless. Of Kale's hand extended in a cellar, offering her a choice and a future. "I can handle it," she said. "Good." Seraphine hauled her to her feet. "Because tomorrow, you're going to show the Northern Territories exactly what happens when you underestimate an Omega. And it's going to be glorious. Please, don't forget to subscribe." Chapter 6. The Riddle of Ancients. 3 hours of sleep felt like 3 seconds. Rhea woke to Margot shaking her shoulder, every muscle in her body screaming protest. The healer had done what she could. The cracked ribs were mended, the worst bruises faded to yellow-green rather than deep purple, but pain still radiated through her limbs like fire. "Up," Margot said gently. "Finn's waiting. You need to work on the cleverness trial before the combat challenge begins at dawn." Rhea forced herself upright, biting back a groan. Someone had moved her to a proper bed while she slept, not the silk-sheeted monstrosity from the Queen's quarters, but a simple cot in what looked like a guard barracks. Through the narrow window, she could see the sky beginning to lighten from black to deep purple. Maybe an hour until sunrise, maybe less. "Here." Margot pressed a cup into her hands. "Tea. It'll help with the pain and sharpen your mind. You'll need both." The tea tasted like bitter herbs and regret, but warmth spread through Rhea's chest as she drank. Her wolf stirred, more alert than it had been in years, and she could feel the heat building, not overwhelming yet, but present. A constant awareness of her body, of her needs, of Kale's absence. Where is he? The question slipped out before she could stop it. The Alpha King, dealing with Victor's faction. Margot's expression darkened. "They spent the night trying to stack the trials against you. Kale's been in emergency council sessions, blocking their attempts to choose your combat opponent, rig the puzzle, or manipulate the character trial." She paused. "He wanted to be here, training with you. I've never seen him so torn between duty and desire." The words warmed something in Rhea's chest that had nothing to do with the tea. She stood carefully, testing her weight on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Everything hurt, but it was manageable. She'd survived worse. "Take me to Finn," she said. The palace library was a cathedral to knowledge. Rhea stood in the entrance, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. Shelves rose 30 feet high, accessible by rolling ladders and spiral staircases. Books lined every surface, ancient tomes bound in leather, scrolls protected in glass cases, manuscripts so old the pages had turned to parchment. The smell of aging paper and ink was almost overwhelming. Impressive, isn't it? Finn's voice echoed from somewhere deep in the stacks. Took my great-great-grandfather 60 years to assemble this collection. Every book on wolf history, pack politics, ancient languages, and most importantly for our purposes, unsolved riddles and puzzles. He emerged from behind a shelf, carrying a stack of books that should have required 3 people to move. His golden eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, but his expression was alert. "I've been researching all night," Finn said, setting the books on a massive table. Traditional trials of cleverness follow specific patterns. They're not just random puzzles, they're designed to test specific qualities. Logic, knowledge, lateral thinking, the ability to see past obvious answers to underlying truth. He opened the top book, revealing pages covered in symbols Rhea didn't recognize. The problem is, we don't know which puzzle they'll choose. The Council has access to dozens of ancient riddles, some of which haven't been solved in centuries. Rhea sank into a chair, staring at the incomprehensible symbols. How am I supposed to solve something that's stumped experts for centuries? By not thinking like an expert. Finn's smile was encouraging. Experts get caught up in complex theories and elaborate solutions. Sometimes the answer is simpler than anyone expects. Here, let me show you. He pulled out another book, flipping to a marked page. This is the riddle of the 3 brothers, posed during a cleverness trial 200 years ago. The riddle goes: 3 brothers guard 3 doors. 1 door leads to freedom, 1 to treasure, 1 to death. 1 brother always tells truth, 1 always lies, 1 alternates between truth and lies. You may ask only 1 question to 1 brother. What do you ask? Rhea's mind spun. That's impossible. If you don't know which brother alternates, any answer could be misleading. That's what the challenger thought. She spent 3 hours trying to devise a question that would work regardless of which brother she asked. She failed the trial. Finn's eyes gleamed. The answer is, if I asked your brother, who always tells the truth, which door leads to freedom, what would he say? The truthful brother would point to freedom. The lying brother would lie about what the truthful brother would say, also pointing to freedom. And the alternating brother, when lying, would lie about the truthful brother freedom again. When telling truth, he'd truthfully report what the truthful brother would say, still freedom. Rhea blinked. That's brilliant. It's lateral thinking. Not asking, which door is freedom, but asking about what someone else would say. Finn pulled out more books. That's the key. The puzzle won't be about knowledge you can't memorize enough in one night to compete with scholars who've studied for decades. It'll be about perspective. About seeing the problem from an angle no one else has considered. For the next hour, Finn walked her through puzzle after puzzle. Some were mathematical complex equations that resolved into simple patterns if you looked at them sideways. Some were linguistic riddles in ancient languages that made no sense, until you realized the words were meant to be read backward or upside down. Some were visual symbols that appeared random, until you stepped back and saw the larger picture they formed. You're good at this, Finn said, after Rhea solved a particularly complex riddle about moon phases and pack hierarchy. Better than I expected. I've had a lot of practice seeing things from unconventional angles, Rhea said quietly. When you're an omega in an alpha-dominated pack, you learn to find paths others don't see. Hidden routes, quiet solutions, ways to survive without direct confrontation. Exactly. Finn leaned forward. That's your advantage. The Council will expect you to approach the puzzle like a scholar methodically, following established rules of logic. But you're not a scholar. You're a survivor. Use that. A bell tolled from somewhere in the palace. Finn's expression turned grim. 30 minutes until dawn. Time to move to the arena. He stood, gathering several of the books. I'll be in the spectator section with these references, just in case the puzzle involves something we studied. If you get stuck, look at me. I'll try to signal hints without being too obvious. Rhea rose on shaking legs. The tea had helped, but exhaustion dragged at her like physical weight. Between the night of combat training and the hour of mental exercises, she'd had maybe 2 hours of actual rest. Her body was running on adrenaline and stubbornness. Finn, she said, as he turned to leave. Thank you, for believing I could do this. He smiled, young and genuine, and so much like Kale's smile it made her chest ache. You're my brother's true mate. That makes you my sister, and family doesn't abandon family." He paused at the door. "Also, I put money on you succeeding. Quite a lot of money. So please don't let me down." Then he was gone, and Rhea was left alone in the vast library, surrounded by centuries of accumulated knowledge, and acutely aware of how little she actually knew. The walk to the arena felt like a march to execution. Margot accompanied her, checking her healing repeatedly and muttering about insufficient recovery time. They moved through palace corridors that grew progressively more crowded, wolves gathering for the spectacle, whispering as Rhea passed. She caught fragments of conversation, barely survived the night training, heard she bit Seraphine like a feral. Victor's chosen Gareth for combat. She doesn't stand a chance. Just wants to embarrass the Alpha King. The arena had been transformed overnight. The tiered seating was packed with hundreds of wolves, council members in the front rows, warriors and civilians filling the higher sections. Guards lined the perimeter, their expressions carefully neutral, and at the highest point, in a throne carved from black stone, sat Kale. He wore full ceremonial regalia robes that seemed to absorb light, a crown of silver that caught the rising sun, and an expression of such cold authority that Rhea barely recognized him. This wasn't the man who'd offered her his hand in a cellar. This was the Alpha King, and he was radiating power that made her wolf whimper and submit. Their eyes met across the distance. Something flickered in his golden gaze: concern, pride, barely restrained violence before his expression smoothed back to neutrality. "Rhea of Silverpaw." Victor's voice boomed across the arena. He stood at the center, dressed in ceremonial armor, looking like a warrior from legend. "You have accepted the trial of worthiness, invoking your right to prove yourself through combat, cleverness, and character. Do you understand that failure in any trial will result in forfeiture of your claim to the position of queen?" "I understand." Rhea's voice sounded small in the vast space. "Do you understand that the trials may result in injury, pain, or in rare cases death?" "I understand." "Then we begin." Victor gestured to a stone pedestal that had been placed at the arena's center. "The trial of cleverness will commence first. Approach." Rhea walked forward on legs that threatened to give out with every step. The pedestal held a single object, a wooden box, ancient and covered in carved symbols that seemed to writhe in the morning light. As she drew closer, she could see that the symbols weren't random. They formed patterns. Equations. A puzzle laid out in 3 dimensions. "This is the labyrinth box," Victor announced. "Created by the first Alpha King 700 years ago. It has been opened only twice in recorded history, once by its creator, once by an Omega Queen 3 centuries ago, who spent 6 months studying it before solving the puzzle." His smile was sharp. "You have 1 hour. Open the box, and you pass the trial. Fail, and you forfeit your claim. 1 hour. Rhea circled the pedestal, studying the box from all angles. The symbols were ancient Pack script predating modern written language by centuries. Some she recognized from Finn's books, others were completely foreign. The wood itself was dark with age, smooth from countless hands touching it over the years. She reached out to touch it and felt warmth. Not physical heat, but something else. A resonance, as if the box was reacting to her presence. "You may begin," Victor said. Rhea took a deep breath and placed both hands on the box. The symbols blazed to life. Light erupted from the carvings, forming patterns in the air around the box. Equations in languages she shouldn't understand, but somehow did. Images of wolves running, hunting, transforming. The history of pack dynamics laid out in visual metaphor. And underneath it all, a question. What binds the pack? Rhea's mind raced. It was a riddle disguised as a puzzle. The box wasn't testing her ability to decode ancient languages. It was testing her understanding of pack nature itself. What bound wolves together? Hierarchy? Tradition? Territory? She thought of Silverpaw, where pack bonds had felt like chains, where hierarchy meant suffering for anyone deemed weak, where tradition was used as a weapon to enforce conformity. No, that wasn't what bound a true pack. She thought of the past 18 hours, of Seraphine drilling combat techniques into her at midnight, of Margot healing her injuries without question, Of Finn spending his night researching puzzles to help her succeed. Of 4 warriors who barely knew her treating her like family because their alpha had chosen her. Choice, she realized. Not obligation, not hierarchy. Choice. The box had multiple panels, each carved with different symbols. Ria's fingers moved across them, finding patterns. Pack symbols representing alpha, beta, omega, warrior. She'd been trying to see them as separate categories, but what if they were meant to overlap? What if the solution was removing the divisions entirely? She pressed 3 panels simultaneously. Alpha, omega, and the symbol for bond. The box hummed. 30 minutes, Victor called out. Sweat beaded on Ria's forehead. The box was responding, but not opening. She was missing something. Some final element that would complete the pattern. Look at the bigger picture, Finn had said. Don't think like an expert. Ria stepped back from the pedestal and looked at the box in context. It sat in the center of the arena, surrounded by hundreds of watching wolves. The arena itself was circular, a perfect representation of pack structure. And the box, with its multiple panels and overlapping symbols, was also circular. A representation within a representation. What binds the pack? Not just choice. Recognition. The understanding that every member, alpha, omega, warrior, healer, was necessary. That removing any piece broke the circle. She'd been trying to solve the puzzle by isolating symbols. She needed to activate them all simultaneously. Ria placed her hands on the box and pushed her awareness outward to Seraphine, watching from the front row, to Margot, holding her breath beside Finn, to Vera and Isla standing with hands on their weapons, to every wolf in the arena, from the highest-ranking council member to the youngest pup who'd snuck in to watch. We are pack, she thought, letting her omega nature sing through her. All of us, together. The box exploded with light. Not destructive, transformative. The symbols blazed so bright Ria had to close her eyes. And when she opened them again, the box lay open. Inside was a single object, a silver crown, delicate as spun glass, sized perfectly for an omega's head. Silence fell over the arena. Victor stared at the open box, his expression frozen between shock and rage. That's impossible. It took the last Omega Queen 6 months. The last Omega Queen was trying to prove her worth to a pack that had already rejected her. Kale's voice rang out. He'd risen from his throne, his eyes locked on Ria with an intensity that made her knees weak. Ria solved it in 20 minutes because she already understands what that queen took 6 months to learn. Pack bonds are not about hierarchy or strength. They're about recognition and choice. He descended the steps with predatory grace. The box opened for her because she is already what she needs to be, a queen who sees value in every member of her pack. He reached the arena floor and walked to Ria. Without hesitation, he lifted the silver crown from the box and placed it on her head. The metal warmed instantly, molding to fit her perfectly, and Ria felt something shift, a connection forming, threads of awareness spreading outward to every wolf in the arena. She could feel them, their emotions, their doubts, their hopes, the pack bond, extending to include her for the first time in her life. The trial of cleverness is complete, Kale announced. The challenger has succeeded. His voice dropped to something more intimate. Well done, my mate. Ria swayed on her feet, overwhelmed by the sudden influx of sensation. Kale caught her easily, one arm supporting her waist. 1 trial down, he murmured. 2 to go. Can you continue? She looked up into his golden eyes and saw her own determination reflected back at her. Yes. Then let's show them what happens when an Omega refuses to quit. Kale straightened, addressing the arena. We will take a 15-minute recess before the trial of combat begins. The challenger requires rest and preparation. No. Ria's voice rang out clearly. No recess. I'm ready now. Kale's eyebrows rose. Victor's expression turned predatory. Are you certain? Kale asked quietly. Combat will be brutal. You've had no rest. And I won't get any during an actual fight. Ria met his eyes. Let's finish this. All of it. Today. Something fierce and proud blazed in Kale's expression. He nodded once, then turned to face the council. The challenger has declined recess. Victor announced the combat trial. Victor's smile was all teeth. The trial of combat is simple. The challenger must face an opponent of the council's choosing. The fight continues until submission, incapacitation, or death. Since the challenger has shown unexpected resilience. His tone made it clear he didn't expect that resilience to last. The council has chosen Gareth Blackclaw as her opponent. A figure emerged from the warrior section of the stands. He was enormous, easily 7 feet tall, shoulders broader than any man had a right to be, arms thick with muscle earned through decades of combat. Scars covered every visible inch of skin, telling stories of battles won through sheer violence. His eyes, when they locked onto Rhea, held no malice, just calm certainty that this fight would end with her broken on the arena floor. Gareth is our finest hand-to-hand combatant, Victor continued. Undefeated in 214 matches. He will show appropriate restraint, of course. We don't want to kill the alpha's mate. Just prove she's unsuited for leadership. Rhea looked at the mountain of muscle and scar tissue approaching the arena floor. Every rational thought in her head screamed that this was impossible, that she should yield now, that surviving the night's training didn't mean she could survive this. But she thought of Seraphine's words. You will win through stubbornness. She thought of Kale's vision, the moon goddess declaring Rhea worthy of being his mate. And she thought of 5 years alone, surviving against every odd, refusing to die just because it would have been easier. I accept the challenge, Rhea said. Kale's hand tightened on her waist for just a moment, then he released her, stepped back, and his expression transformed into the cold mask of the Alpha King. Let the trial of combat begin. Chapter 7. The Omega's Fury. Gareth entered the arena like a force of nature. Each step shook the ground, or perhaps that was just Rhea's imagination painting him as more monster than man. He wore minimal clothing, just leather pants, that allowed freedom of movement, and every inch of exposed skin told stories written in scar tissue. A gash across his ribs from a bear attack, claw marks on his shoulder from a rival pack's champion, burns along his forearms from a firefight gone wrong. This was a man who'd survived 214 opponents. This was a man who killed for a living. And Rhea, who'd learned to fight approximately 12 hours ago, was supposed to last against him. Combatants, to your positions. Victor's voice carried across the arena. The rules are simple. No weapons, no killing blows, no interference from spectators. The fight continues until one party submits or is rendered unconscious. He paused, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Begin when the bell rings. Rhea moved to the center of the arena, on legs that threatened to buckle. Gareth took position opposite her, his expression still neutral. Up close, he was even more intimidating. His chest was a wall of muscle, his hands large enough to crush her skull with minimal effort. I will try not to hurt you too badly, Gareth said quietly. His voice was surprisingly gentle for a man his size. But I have my orders. You must be defeated thoroughly enough that the council cannot question the outcome. Understood. Rhea shifted her weight, trying to remember everything Seraphine had drilled into her. Protect your head, stay mobile, never commit fully to an attack. Make them work for every inch. I have my orders too. Don't submit. Gareth's eyebrows rose slightly. Then this will be unpleasant for both of us. The bell rang. Gareth moved impossibly fast for his size, and Rhea barely dodged the strike aimed at her midsection. She felt the air displacement as his fist passed inches from her ribs. Felt the power behind the blow that would have ended the fight instantly if it connected. She rolled left, came up in a crouch, and found Gareth already adjusting. He wasn't pursuing aggressively, he was hurting her, cutting off escape routes, forcing her into progressively smaller spaces. This was a hunter who'd fought hundreds of opponents. He knew every trick, every desperation move, every way a smaller fighter might try to survive. Rhea feinted right, then dove left. Gareth's hand shot out and caught her ankle mid-dive. The world inverted. She hit the ground hard enough to see stars, all the air exploding from her lungs. Gareth's grip was iron, dragging her backward across the packed earth. She twisted, kicked with her free leg, and somehow connected with his jaw. It was like kicking stone. Gareth's head barely moved, but his grip loosened just enough. Rhea wrenched free, scrambled to her feet, and put distance between them. Her back screamed where it had struck the ground, her ankle throbbed where he'd grabbed her, and they'd been fighting for maybe 20 seconds. "You're faster than I expected," Gareth said, rolling his jaw experimentally. That actually stung. Around them, the crowd was silent, hundreds of wolves watching, waiting to see how long the Omega could last. Rhea could feel their attention like pressure, could sense their skepticism and curiosity, and from some, a terrible hope that she might actually survive this. She couldn't let them down. Couldn't let Cale down. Couldn't let herself down. Gareth advanced again, and this time Rhea didn't retreat. She moved forward instead, not attacking directly, but angling for his blind spot. Seraphine had taught her this. Big fighters had blind spots, areas their bulk prevented them from defending effectively. The key was getting there without being caught. She almost made it. Gareth's elbow caught her in the shoulder, spinning her sideways. She felt something pop, not broken, but definitely damaged, and her left arm went partially numb. She staggered, fought for balance, and barely avoided his follow-up strike that would have crushed her windpipe. "Trust your wolf," Cale had told her through Finn. "She knows what you need." Rhea stopped trying to fight like a trained warrior. She let her wolf rise, that suppressed, beaten-down part of her that had been caged for 5 years, and her wolf was furious. Furious at Silverpaw for throwing her away. Furious at the council for testing her when she'd already proven herself by surviving the unsurvivable. Furious at this giant warrior who treated her like a problem to be solved rather than an opponent to be respected. She dropped lower than any trained fighter would go, and drove forward like a battering ram. Her shoulder caught Gareth in the knee. Not hard enough to damage, but enough to disrupt his balance. He stumbled, and Rhea was already moving, climbing him like he was terrain rather than a person. Her numb arm was useless, but her right hand found his throat, her legs wrapped around his torso, and she squeezed. Gareth grabbed her, trying to pry her off, but she'd made herself impossible to grip properly. Her weight was distributed wrong, her body twisting in ways that defied his attempts to throw her. He spun, trying to slam her into the ground, but she held on with desperate strength born of 5 years surviving alone. "Submit," she hissed in his ear. "No." Gareth's voice was strained but certain. He dropped backward deliberately, crushing her beneath his weight. Rhea felt ribs crack, not the ones Margot had healed, new ones, and her grip loosened. Gareth rolled, pinning her with his mass, his forearm across her throat in a hold that would render her unconscious in seconds if she couldn't break it. Rhea bit him, not a warning nip like she'd given Seraphine. A full force, feral bite that drew blood and made Gareth roar. His hold loosened, and she wriggled free, leaving skin and blood in her wake. She rolled to her feet, gasping, tasting copper. "You fight dirty," Gareth said, examining the bleeding wound on his forearm. But there was respect in his voice now, not just pity. "I fight to survive." Rhea spat blood. "There's a difference." They circled each other, both breathing hard. Rhea knew she couldn't win, not in any traditional sense. Gareth was stronger, faster, more skilled. She'd landed maybe 3 successful hits in 5 minutes, while he'd broken her ribs, damaged her shoulder, and nearly choked her unconscious. But she was still standing. 5 minutes, someone called from the crowd. Victor, probably, tracking her failure. Except it wasn't failure. Not yet. Rhea launched herself forward again, ignoring the screaming pain in her ribs. Gareth moved to intercept, but this time she was ready. She dropped into a slide, something Isla had shown her, passing under his guard, and striking upward at the pressure point behind his knee. Her fist connected perfectly, and Gareth's leg buckled. He didn't fall, he was too experienced for that, but he shifted his weight, compensating. And in that half-second of adjustment, Rhea was already moving. She bounced off the ground, used his bent leg as a springboard, and drove her elbow toward his temple. Gareth caught her mid-strike. His hand wrapped around her entire forearm, stopping her attack cold. Then he threw her. Rhea hit the arena wall with enough force to crack stone. She slid down, leaving a smear of blood, and lay there trying to remember how to breathe. Her vision grayed, her wolf whimpered. Every nerve in her body was screaming for her to submit, to end this. to accept defeat, and the relative mercy it would bring. Through the haze of pain, she heard Cale's voice not speaking, but a low growl that resonated through the arena. He wanted to intervene. His mate was being brutalized in front of him, and every instinct was demanding he stop it. But he didn't. Because she'd made a choice, and he was honoring it. Rhea pushed herself to her hands and knees. Blood dripped from her mouth, her nose. Somewhere on her head where she'd struck the wall. The silver crown had fallen off, lying in the dirt a few feet away. She crawled toward it, each movement agony. "Stay down," Gareth said. Not unkindly. "You've proven your courage. No one will think less of you for submitting now." "I will." Rhea reached the crown, picked it up with shaking hands, and placed it back on her head. The metal warmed, and she felt that pack bond surge, hundreds of wolves witnessing her refusal to quit, their emotions flooding through the connection. Shock, admiration, fear, hope. She used the wall to pull herself upright. "I'm not done." "Yes, you are," Gareth advanced, his expression sad. "I'm sorry, but I have to end this now before you kill yourself through stubbornness." He was right. Rhea knew he was right. Her body was destroyed, her energy depleted, her wolf barely clinging to consciousness. One more solid hit would finish her. But she'd learned something important during 5 years of exile. Surviving wasn't about winning. It was about refusing to die. About lasting one more minute, one more hour, one more day against impossible odds. So when Gareth reached for her intending a gentle hold that would end the fight without further injury, Rhea did the only thing she had left. She went for his eyes. Not to blind him, she pulled the strike at the last instant, but to make him flinch, to create an opening. He jerked back instinctively, and in that half-second, Rhea drove her knee upward with every ounce of remaining strength. She caught him perfectly in the solar plexus. The strike wouldn't have fazed him normally, but he was off balance, unprepared, his defenses down. Air exploded from his lungs in a surprised grunt. Rhea followed with a wild combination of strikes, no technique, no form, just desperate violence aimed at any target she could reach. Most missed or glanced off ineffectively, but one, a backhanded strike driven more by momentum than strength, caught Gareth across the temple. He swayed. For one impossible moment, the giant warrior teetered on his feet, his eyes unfocused. Then his knees buckled, and he crashed to the ground like a felled tree. The arena erupted in chaos. Rhea stood over Gareth's fallen form, gasping, bleeding, barely able to stand. She'd won. Somehow, impossibly, she'd won. Not through skill or strength, but through absolute refusal to surrender. "The fight is over." Victor's voice cut through the noise, sharp with disbelief. "The challenger has rendered her opponent unconscious. The trial of combat is complete." The words seemed to break whatever spell had held the crowd silent. Wolves were on their feet, some cheering, others arguing, many just staring in shock. Rhea heard fragments over the roaring in her ears. She actually did it. No one's ever dropped Gareth. Luck, pure luck. Did you see her refuse to quit? Then Cale was there, moving faster than Rhea had ever seen him move. He caught her as her legs finally gave out, cradling her against his chest with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence she'd just endured. "You magnificent, stubborn, absolutely insane woman," he murmured against her hair. "You were supposed to survive, not win. I don't do things halfway." Rhea managed through split lips. "You should probably know that about me." His laugh was strangled. "Margot, get down here now." The healer appeared within seconds, her hands already glowing with the soft light that indicated active healing magic. "She has 3 cracked ribs, different ones than before a dislocated shoulder, a moderate concussion, and about 15 different bruises, ranging from painful to how is she still conscious." Margot's hands moved over Rhea's body, knitting bone and tissue. "Also, she's in the early stages of heat, which means her pain tolerance is compromised, and her body is burning through energy faster than normal. She needs food, rest, and one more trial," Rhea interrupted. "The character test. We finish this today." "Absolutely not." Cale's voice was firm. "You can barely stand. The character trial can wait." No. Rhea pushed against his chest, forcing him to set her down even though her legs wobbled. Victor invoked traditional law. Traditional law says all 3 trials must be completed in 1 day, or the challenge is forfeit. She looked up at him. If I stop now, I lose everything. And I didn't get beaten half to death just to quit at the finish line. Cale stared at her, emotions warring across his face. Then he turned to face the council, and when he spoke, his voice carried the full weight of his authority. The challenger has completed 2 trials. She has proven her cleverness by opening the labyrinth box in record time. She has proven her combat ability by defeating Gareth Blackclaw, a warrior who has not lost a match in 12 years. He paused, letting that sink in. The final trial will commence after a 30-minute recess for medical treatment. Anyone who objects may leave now and forfeit their council position. No one moved. Victor looked like he'd swallowed something poisonous, but he nodded stiffly. 30 minutes. Then the trial of character begins. As Margot guided Rhea toward a medical tent that had been set up at the arena's edge, Rhea caught Seraphine's eye in the crowd. The warrior was grinning fiercely, and she mouthed 2 words. Well done. Inside the tent, away from the staring crowds, Rhea finally let herself collapse. Margot worked quickly, using healing magic to repair the worst damage while Vera force-fed her protein and water. The character trial is the most unpredictable, Vera said quietly. No one knows what they'll throw at you. It could be a moral dilemma, a test of loyalty, a choice between competing goods. She paused. Or it could be designed to break you psychologically where combat couldn't break you physically. Comforting, Rhea muttered. I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to prepare you. Vera's blue eyes were serious. Whatever they show you, whatever choice they offer, remember that character isn't about making the right decision. It's about making your decision and standing by it. Queens can be wrong. They can make mistakes, but they can't be indecisive. Rhea nodded, filing the advice away. Her body was mending. Margot was skilled enough that the cracked ribs were already knitting back together, but her mind was exhausted. 2 trials down. 1 to go. And she had no idea what was waiting for her. Through the tent flap, she could see wolves gathering, preparing for the final trial. The sun had climbed to its zenith. She'd been fighting and solving puzzles for hours, though it felt like minutes. And somewhere in the crowd, Cale was watching, trusting her to finish what she'd started. She wouldn't let him down. Time, Victor called from outside. The challenger must present herself for the final trial. Rhea stood on still shaky legs, accepted the cloak Margot offered, and walked back into the arena. The crowd had somehow grown. Word must have spread throughout the capital about the Omega who'd defeated Gareth Blackclaw. Faces pressed against every available space, wolves perched on walls and rooftops, all of them desperate to witness the conclusion. Victor stood at the center of the arena beside 2 chairs that had been placed facing each other. Simple wooden chairs, nothing ceremonial or threatening about them. But Rhea's wolf was suddenly on high alert, sensing danger in a way that had nothing to do with physical threats. The trial of character, Victor announced, tests not your skills or knowledge, but your essential nature, your ability to make difficult choices under pressure, your willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. He gestured to the chairs. Please, sit. Rhea sat, every muscle tense. Victor remained standing, but a figure emerged from the crowd to take the opposite chair. Lyanna, Rhea's twin sister, sat across from her, wearing the formal robes of a Silverpaw Pack Alpha in training. She looked exactly as Rhea remembered, beautiful in that classical alpha way, with strong features and confident bearing and eyes that had once held affection but now held only calculation. Hello, sister, Lyanna said softly. It's been a long time, and Rhea realized with dawning horror what the character trial would be. Chapter 8. The Choice of Blood. Rhea couldn't breathe. 5 years. 5 years since she'd seen her twin's face, heard her voice, been close enough to touch the person who'd shared a womb with her. 5 years since Lyanna had stood before the Silverpaw Council and called her a genetic aberration that needed to be removed for the greater good. Surprised? Victor's voice held dark amusement. The trial of character requires a genuine test, not some abstract moral dilemma, but a real choice, with real consequences. So we invited your sister to participate. She came quite willingly, I might add. Liana's expression remained neutral, but Rhea caught the slight tension around her eyes. Her twin was nervous. Good. She should be. The trial is simple, Victor continued. Liana of Silverpaw has traveled here under a flag of diplomacy to discuss potential reconciliation between her pack and the Northern Territories. However, during her journey, our scouts discovered that Silverpaw forces are massing at our southern border, a clear preparation for invasion, timed to coincide with this trial to catch us distracted and unprepared. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Rhea felt the pack bond surge with alarm and anger. An invasion, during a sacred trial. The dishonor of it was staggering. Liana claims she knew nothing of these military movements, Victor said. She insists she came in good faith, that Elder Morana acted without informing the Alpha heirs. She may be telling the truth. Or she may be a spy, sent to gather intelligence while her pack prepares for war. His smile was sharp. Your choice, Queen Rhea, is this. Do you believe your sister? Do you grant her sanctuary as a diplomatic guest? Or do you declare her a spy and order her execution as an enemy combatant? The arena fell silent. Rhea stared at her twin, searching for some sign of the girl who'd held her hand during childhood thunderstorms, who'd shared secrets in the dark, who'd promised they'd always protect each other no matter what. But that girl was gone, replaced by this polished alpha who'd betrayed her without hesitation when it became politically convenient. This is insane. Kale's voice cut through the tension. He'd risen from his throne, fury radiating from him in waves. You're asking her to judge her own sister based on incomplete intelligence. I'm asking her to prioritize pack safety over personal sentiment, Victor interrupted, which is exactly what a queen must do. If she chooses wrong, grants sanctuary to a spy, or executes an innocent diplomat, the consequences will be catastrophic. But that's the nature of leadership. Difficult choices with imperfect information. And if I refuse to choose? Rhea asked quietly. Then you fail the trial. Victor's tone was flat. A queen who cannot make hard decisions is no queen at all. You have until the sand runs out. He gestured to an hourglass that had been placed on a stand beside the chairs. 10 minutes. The sand began to fall. Rhea looked at her sister. Really looked at her. Liana had changed in 5 years. The softness of youth had been replaced by the hardened features of someone who'd climbed the pack hierarchy through ruthless determination. But there were shadows under her eyes, lines of tension around her mouth, and her hands, folded primly in her lap, were trembling. Did you know? Rhea asked. About the invasion? No. Liana's answer came immediately. I swear by the moon goddess. I had no knowledge of military movements. Mother sent me here with instructions to observe your trials, report back on Northern Territory defenses, and, she hesitated, and what? And offer you a chance to come home. Liana's voice dropped. If you failed the trials, if the Northern Territories rejected you, Mother authorized me to negotiate for your return. With conditions, of course. The sterilization order still stands, but you'd be allowed back into the pack, given a position in the kitchens, permitted to live out your life in relative comfort. The words landed like blows. Even now, even after everything, Silverpaw saw her as a problem to be managed rather than a person with value, and Liana had delivered the message without apparent irony, as if offering to take her back on the condition she mutilate herself was somehow generous. You really don't see it, do you? Rhea said softly. You don't see how wrong that is. I see reality. Liana leaned forward. You're Omega, Rhea. In our pack, in most packs, that means limitations. I didn't make those rules. I'm just trying to survive within them and help you survive too, in whatever way I can. By testifying against me at my exile trial, by calling me defective? Liana flinched. I said what Mother told me to say. If I'd defended you, she would have exiled both of us. I chose survival. I chose the pack over personal loyalty. That's what alphas do. No. Rhea's voice hardened. That's what cowards do. Alphas protect their pack, all of it, not just the strong members. You threw me away to save yourself, then convinced yourself it was noble sacrifice. I was trying to protect you. Liana's composure cracked. Don't you understand? If I'd defended you, Mother would have made your exile so much worse. I testified against you so she'd be satisfied. So she'd give you supplies and a cabin instead of just throwing you to the wolves with nothing. I saved your life, and you've hated me for it ever since." The words hung between them, and Rhea felt something shift in her understanding. She'd spent 5 years believing Liana had betrayed her out of ambition or cruelty, but what if her twin had been trying, in her limited, misguided way, to help? What if the testimony had been calculated, not to destroy Rhea, but to make her exile survivable? It didn't excuse what Liana had done, but it complicated it. 6 minutes, Victor announced. Rhea could feel hundreds of eyes watching, waiting to see what she'd choose. Through the pack bond, she sensed their emotions. Some wanted mercy, believing family deserved consideration. Others wanted justice, seeing Liana as a symbol of Silverpaw's cruelty. Still others simply wanted to see what their potential queen valued more, blood or duty. "Tell me about the invasion," Rhea said. "If you don't know the details, tell me what you do know about Silverpaw's military capabilities. Prove you're not a spy." Liana's eyes widened. "I can't. That information could be used against my birth pack. Even if I'm telling the truth about not knowing the invasion plans, revealing military intelligence would make me a traitor. So, you're asking me to trust you while refusing to prove you're trustworthy. I'm asking you to remember that we're sisters, that we shared a womb, a childhood, a bond that shouldn't break just because pack politics tore us apart." Liana's voice cracked. "I'm asking you to show mercy. Mercy." Rhea thought of Elder Marana declaring exile was mercy. Thought of Victor claiming this impossible choice was about leadership. Thought of every time someone had told her to accept cruelty as kindness, because that's just how the world worked. She was tired of other people's definitions of mercy. 4 minutes, Victor said. Rhea stood, ignoring the protest from her still healing ribs. She walked to where Kale sat, his golden eyes tracking her every movement. When she reached him, she knelt not in submission, but to speak privately. "Tell me honestly," she said quietly. "Is there really an invasion force at the border?" "Yes." Kale's voice was grim. "Our scouts confirmed it an hour ago. Approximately 300 Silverpaw warriors, positioned for a coordinated assault. They're waiting for something, probably a signal from inside our territory. And if Liana is a spy? If I grant her sanctuary, and she sends that signal? Then we'll face a 3-front attack while our forces are dispersed for the trial. We'll win Northern Territory, always wins, but we'll take casualties. Good wolves will die." His eyes searched hers. "But if she's innocent, and you execute her, you'll start a war based on suspicion rather than fact. Silverpaw will use her death as justification for retaliation, and the Continental Council will support them. So either choice could trigger war." "Yes." Kale's hand came up to cup her cheek, the gesture achingly gentle. "I can't make this choice for you, Rhea. This is what it means to be queen, carrying the weight of decisions that have no good outcome. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. The pack will support you, but you have to be the one to choose." Rhea looked into his eyes and saw complete trust. He wasn't trying to guide her toward a specific decision. He was simply standing beside her, ready to face the consequences together. She stood and returned to face her sister. 2 minutes, Victor announced. "I need you to understand something," Rhea said to Liana. "When you testified against me, when you called me genetically defective and dangerous, you weren't protecting me, you were protecting yourself. You chose your position over our bond, and that choice had consequences. I've spent 5 years learning to survive without you, without the pack, without anyone who was supposed to care about me. I don't need your version of mercy anymore." Liana's face paled. "So, you're going to execute me, your own sister?" "No." Rhea's voice was steady. "I'm going to do what you never did for me. I'm going to tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs me something." She turned to address the entire arena, her voice carrying to every corner. "Liana of Silverpaw claims she came in good faith, with no knowledge of the invasion force at our borders. I believe her." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the crowd. "I believe her because I know my sister. She's ambitious, politically minded, and willing to make hard choices to advance her position. But she's not a spy. She's a pawn sent here by Elder Marana to distract us while Silverpaw prepared for war. but kept ignorant of the actual plan so her ignorance would seem genuine. Victor's expression turned calculating. So you grant her sanctuary? No. Rhea met Liana's shocked gaze. I'm declaring her a political prisoner. She'll be held in comfortable confinement, treated well, given every courtesy, but she won't be free to leave or communicate with Silverpaw until the invasion threat is resolved. She came here as a diplomat, and diplomats are often detained during wartime. This is neither execution nor sanctuary. It's pragmatic compromise. That's not one of the options I gave you. Victor protested. You gave me two choices, both designed to make me fail, Rhea said coldly. Execute her, and I'm a monster who kills family without proof. Grant sanctuary, and I'm naive fool who prioritizes sentiment over security. But queens don't have to accept false dichotomies. We make our own options. She looked at Liana, whose eyes were bright with unshed tears. You'll be treated as an honored guest, Rhea continued. Given comfortable quarters, good food, books, and whatever entertainment you desire. But you'll also be watched constantly, and you won't be permitted to leave until this crisis is over. When it's resolved, when we know for certain whether you were complicit or ignorant, we'll revisit your status. Maybe you'll go home. Maybe you'll stand trial. Or maybe, she paused, maybe you'll choose to stay and learn what it means to be part of a pack that values all its members, not just the strong ones. Silence fell across the arena. Then Kale stood, and his voice rang out with unmistakable pride. The challenger has completed the trial of character. She faced an impossible choice and created a third option that balanced mercy with security, family loyalty with pack duty. She has proven that she possesses the wisdom to lead. He descended from his throne and approached Rhea. Does the council object to her decision? Victor looked like he wanted to object strenuously. But around him, other council members were nodding, whispering, and slowly one by one they stood. The Omega has passed all 3 trials, Thaddeus announced. She has demonstrated cleverness, combat ability, and sound judgment under pressure. By the old laws that Victor himself invoked, she has earned the right to stand as queen. He looked directly at Victor. Do you challenge this assessment? Victor's jaw worked. Finally, with visible effort, he knelt. I acknowledge Rhea of Silverpaw. He paused, correcting himself. Rhea of Northern Territory as my queen. May her reign be long and prosperous. The rest of the council followed suit, kneeling in waves that spread through the arena like falling dominoes. Hundreds of wolves, from the highest-ranking warriors to the youngest civilians, all acknowledging her right to rule. Rhea stood in the center of it all, battered and bleeding and barely able to stand, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. She was no longer the rejected Omega, the worthless twin, the exile who'd been thrown away. She was their queen, and she'd earned it through blood and stubbornness, and refusing to accept anyone else's definition of who she could be. Kale moved behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. One more thing, he said quietly. The trials are complete. The pack has accepted you, but we still need to finalize the mate bond. His breath was warm against her ear. The full moon rises tonight. Traditional ceremony requires that we complete the bonding before the lunar cycle ends. Are you ready? Rhea thought of everything that had led to this moment. The cellar, the blizzard, the cabin surrounded by 30 wolves, the training, the trials, the choices that had brought her from exile to coronation in less than 2 days. She thought of Kale's hand extended in the darkness, offering her a future she'd never dared imagine. Yes, she said. I'm ready. His arms tightened around her, and she felt his relief through their incomplete bond. Then tonight, under the full moon, you become truly mine, and I become truly yours. He turned her to face him, his golden eyes blazing with intensity. Rest now, my queen. Heal, because when the moon rises, I'm going to show you exactly what it means to be the mate of an alpha king. Heat flooded through Rhea, not just the biological heat of her Omega nature, but something deeper. Want, need, the recognition that this man, this impossible, powerful, gentle man, was hers in a way nothing else had ever been. I'll be ready, she promised. Around them, the pack was celebrating cheers and howls rising to meet the afternoon sun. But Rhea barely heard them. She was focused on Cale, on the promise in his eyes, on the future that stretched before them like an unwritten story. A future where she wasn't worthless, where she wasn't weak, where she was exactly what she needed to be. Herself, flawed and fierce. And finally, free. Margot appeared with a wheelchair. You've been standing for 20 minutes on 3 cracked ribs and a concussion. Sit down before you fall down. Rhea sat gratefully, letting the healer push her toward the medical tent. As they passed through the crowd, wolves reached out to touch her, not with pity or contempt, but with reverence. Their queen, their Omega, who'd defeated a legendary warrior, solved an ancient puzzle, and navigated an impossible political situation. But before they reached the tent, Lyanna's voice called out, "Rhea, wait." Rhea gestured for Margot to stop. Lyanna approached slowly, flanked by 2 guards who'd been assigned to escort her to her confinement. Up close, Rhea could see the tears streaking her sister's face. "I'm sorry," Lyanna whispered. "For the trial, for my testimony. For every moment, I chose politics over family. I told myself I was protecting you, but really I was just protecting myself from Mother's wrath. You deserved better. You deserved a sister who would fight for you, not abandon you when things got hard." Rhea studied her twin, this person, who'd shared her DNA but not her values, who'd been shaped by the same pack that had rejected Rhea, but had learned completely different lessons from it. "You did what you thought you had to do," Rhea said finally. "I don't forgive you, not yet. Maybe not ever. But I understand you better now. And maybe that's enough for now." Lyanna nodded, accepting the non-forgiveness with more grace than Rhea expected. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you found this. A pack that values you, an alpha who sees your worth, a position where you can make the changes you always talked about when we were children." She smiled sadly. "You were always meant for more than Silverpaw could offer. I just wish I'd realized it before I helped them throw you away." "So do I," Rhea said quietly. "But we don't get to rewrite the past, only move forward from where we are." The guards led Lyanna away, and Rhea let herself be wheeled into the medical tent where Margot immediately began fussing over her injuries. But her mind was already moving forward, planning for the night ahead, the full moon, the mating ceremony, the final step in becoming not just queen, but Cale's true mate in every sense of the word. She'd survived exile, passed the trials, earned her crown through blood and determination. Now it was time to claim her future. Chapter 9. The Moon's Blessing. The moon rose like a promise. Rhea stood in the Queen's chambers, truly hers now, not just borrowed space, watching silver light spill across the northern capital. From this high tower, she could see the entire territory spread below, the palace grounds with their manicured gardens, the city with its winding streets and bustling markets now quiet in the evening, and beyond that, the wild forests that stretched to the horizon, all of it hers to protect, hers to guide, hers to rule. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt right. "Stop staring at the moon like it's going to give you answers." Seraphine's voice came from behind her. "It won't. Trust me, I've asked." Rhea turned to find her chambers had been invaded by the Queen's guard, all 4 women present, carrying various items that ranged from ceremonial to alarming. Seraphine held a dress of white silk that seemed to glow in the moonlight. Vera carried oils and perfumes. Isla had brushes and cosmetics. And Margot held a book that looked ancient and slightly forbidden. "What is that?" Rhea asked warily. "Educational materials." Margot's expression was perfectly innocent. "Mating ceremonies involve certain activities that you may not have experience with, given your sheltered upbringing and 5 years of isolation." Heat flooded Rhea's face. "I know how mating works. Knowing and experiencing are different things." Margot opened the book to a marked page. "For instance, did you know that alpha knots can ender?" "Margot." Seraphine's voice cracked like a whip. "We agreed. No traumatizing the Queen before her mating ceremony." "I'm not traumatizing, I'm educating." But Margot closed the book with obvious reluctance. "Fine. But if things go wrong tonight, don't blame me. Nothing will go wrong. Isla began laying out cosmetics on the dressing table. The Alpha King has been planning this ceremony for 2 days. Every detail has been considered. Every tradition honored. It's going to be perfect. Except for the part where our queen can barely walk. Vera gestured at Ria's still healing injuries. Margot, how much of her damage did you actually repair? Enough that she won't die during the ceremony. Margot's tone was defensive. The ribs are mended, the concussion resolved, the shoulder back in its socket. But there's only so much healing magic can do in 8 hours. She's going to be sore, tired, and probably in moderate pain throughout the entire bonding. She paused, though the endorphins from the mate bond completion will help with that. Supposedly, Ria's voice rose slightly. I've never personally completed a mate bond, so I'm working from theoretical knowledge and historical accounts. Margot's expression turned thoughtful. Though I did assist with Queen Alara's mating ceremony 15 years ago, and she seemed quite satisfied with the outcome. At least until the poisoning. Can we maybe not mention the queen who got poisoned right before Ria's coronation? Seraphine suggested dryly. Just a thought. Right. Sorry. Margot smiled apologetically. The point is, you'll be fine. Probably. Almost certainly. There's a very high likelihood of survival. Ria wasn't sure whether to laugh or panic. She settled for sitting at the dressing table and letting the women work. They moved with practiced efficiency. Isla applying subtle cosmetics that enhanced rather than concealed. Vera massaging scented oils into her skin that smelled of night-blooming flowers and something wild she couldn't name. Seraphine brushing her hair until it shone like dark water in moonlight. The dress, Seraphine announced, is traditional mating ceremony attire. White silk to represent purity of intention, not virginity, mind you. Just honest purpose. The silver thread is woven with moonflower petals, which are said to attract the moon goddess's blessing. And the cut, she held up the dress, revealing that it was essentially a silk shift that would leave very little to imagination. Is designed for easy removal. For obvious reasons. Ria stared at the barely there garment. That's not much dress. You're completing a mate bond, not attending a diplomatic dinner. Vera grinned. Besides, you'll only be wearing it for about 15 minutes. If that, the Alpha King has been separated from his mate for 2 days while you recovered. He's been pacing his chambers like a caged wolf, driving his advisors insane. The moment he sees you in this dress, ceremonial patience is going to become very difficult for him. Something low in Ria's belly tightened at the thought. Her heat had been building all day. The suppressants completely gone from her system now. Her omega nature rising strong and demanding. She could smell Kale, even though he was 3 floors away, could sense his presence through their incomplete bond, could feel the pull drawing her toward him like gravity. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. The women exchanged glances. Then Seraphine knelt beside her chair, taking her hand. That's normal, the warrior said gently. Mating bonds are permanent, Ria. Unbreakable except by death. Once you complete this ceremony, you and the Alpha King will be connected for life. Your emotions, your pain, your joy, all shared through the bond. It's intimate in a way that goes beyond physical. It's letting someone see every part of you, including the parts you hide from yourself. She squeezed Ria's hand. But I've known Kale since I was 6 years old. I've seen him at his best and worst. And I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you, like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his entire life. He won't hurt you, won't betray you, won't treat you as anything less than his equal. How can you be sure? Because he chose you. Margot's voice was soft. The moon goddess offered him his true mate, something he'd stopped believing he'd ever find. And he didn't hesitate, didn't question whether you were suitable or politically advantageous. He just acted, because his soul recognized yours. That kind of certainty is rare, precious, worth protecting. Isla began weaving flowers into Ria's hair, white moonflowers that glowed with their own faint luminescence. The ceremony itself is simple. You'll walk to the sacred grove where pack matings have been conducted for 700 years. The council and pack witnesses will be present, but distant. This moment is private, even when observed. Kale will state his intention to bond. You'll accept or refuse. If you accept, you'll consummate the bond under the full moon. She paused. The magic happens during that consummation. You'll feel the bond snap into place, connecting your souls. It's supposed to be the most intense experience of your life. No pressure, Rhea muttered. Just remember to breathe. Vera helped her stand and guided her toward the white silk dress. And if at any point you need to stop, you say so. Mate bonds require consent, continuous, enthusiastic consent. The Alpha King knows this. He'll follow your lead. The dress slid over Rhea's skin like water-cool silk that warmed instantly to her body temperature, conforming to her curves with disturbing accuracy. It was beautiful and revealing, and made her feel both powerful and vulnerable simultaneously. Perfect. Seraphine stepped back to assess. You look like the moon goddess herself. The Alpha King is going to lose his mind. A knock sounded at the door, 3 sharp raps that made everyone straighten to attention. It's time. Finn's voice called from outside. The full moon has reached its apex. The pack is assembled. The Alpha King awaits. Rhea's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment that would define the rest of her life. She could still refuse walk away from the bond, from Kale, from the position of queen and everything it entailed. The choice was still hers, but she'd made her choice in a cellar 2 days ago, when she took his hand. Everything since had just been confirmation. I'm ready, she said. The women formed an honor guard around her, Seraphine in front, Vera and Isla flanking, Margot behind. They moved through the palace in procession, passing servants and guards who bowed as she passed. Through windows, Rhea could see the full moon riding high, so bright it cast shadows sharp as daylight. They descended through levels of the palace she'd never seen before. Older sections where the walls were rough stone and the ceilings low, where ancient pack symbols had been carved directly into the rock, down and down, until they reached a door that opened onto the wild night. The sacred grove lay beyond. It was smaller than Rhea expected, a clearing perhaps 50 feet across, ringed by ancient trees whose branches formed a natural cathedral overhead. Moonlight flooded the space, turning everything silver and shadow, and in the center, standing on ground that had hosted countless mating ceremonies, stood Kale. He wore traditional Alpha ceremonial attire, minimal leather, that left most of his scarred torso bare, marked with paint in patterns that told his lineage story. His dark hair had been pulled back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, and his golden eyes, when they locked onto Rhea, blazed with an intensity that stole her breath. Around the clearing's edge, the pack had assembled hundreds of wolves bearing witness in silence. The council stood in positions of honor, even Victor present, though his expression was carefully neutral. And in the trees above, Rhea could swear she saw additional wolves, spirits perhaps, or ancestors, drawn by the sacred nature of what was about to occur. Seraphine guided Rhea to the clearing's edge, then stepped back with the other guards. Rhea stood alone at the threshold, suddenly very aware that hundreds of eyes were watching, that this moment would become pack history, that whatever happened next would define her reign. Rhea of Northern Territory. Kale's voice carried across the clearing, formal and resonant. I, Kale Nightfang, Alpha King of Northern Territory, declare my intention to bond. I offer you my protection, my loyalty, my strength, and my soul. I swear by the moon goddess to honor you as my equal, cherish you as my mate, and stand beside you through every challenge our future brings. He extended his hand, an echo of that first offer in the cellar. Do you accept this bond? Every wolf in the grove held their breath. Rhea stepped forward into the moonlight. The silver dress glowed, and she felt the pack bond surge, hundreds of wolves connected to her through threads of shared purpose and recognition. They were waiting for her answer, trusting her to make the right choice, believing she was worthy of standing beside their Alpha King. She'd spent 5 years believing she was worthless, 2 days proving she was wrong. Time to finish the transformation. I, Rhea, of Northern Territory, accept your bond. Her voice rang clear despite her racing heart. I offer you my truth, my courage, my loyalty, and my soul. I swear by the moon goddess to stand beside you as queen, to guide our pack with wisdom and compassion, and to love you with everything I am. She walked forward and took his hand. I accept this bond, Kale Nightfang. Make me yours. The words were barely out of her mouth before Kale pulled her into his arms. His kiss was claiming and gentle simultaneously, lips that demanded and asked permission in the same breath. Hands that held her like she was precious and unbreakable, despite knowing exactly how strong she'd proven herself to be. Rhea melted into him, feeling his warmth, his strength, his absolute certainty that she belonged right here. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kale's eyes had gone pure gold, his wolf rising to the surface, eager to complete the bond. "The witnesses may leave," he announced, his voice rough with barely restrained need. "The bond will be completed in privacy." The pack began to disperse, warriors and civilians filing out of the grove with varying expressions of anticipation and amusement. The Queen's Guard lingered until Seraphine caught Rhea's eye and mouthed, "Breathe. Enjoy. We'll be guarding the perimeter." Then, they were alone. Kale's hand came up to cup Rhea's face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Once we complete this bond, it's permanent. You'll be tied to me, my emotions, my wolf, my very soul for the rest of our lives. If you have any doubts, any hesitation, tell me now." Rhea looked up into those golden eyes and saw her future. Challenges and triumphs, political battles and quiet moments. A lifetime of standing beside this impossible man who'd traveled through a blizzard because a goddess told him his mate was dying. She saw everything she'd never dared hope for. "No doubts," she whispered. "Make me yours, Alpha King." Completely. The last thread of Kale's restraint snapped. He lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest as he carried her to the center of the grove, where soft moss had been laid out like a bed. The moon overhead seemed to grow brighter, bathing them in silver light as he laid her down gently, his body covering hers with careful precision that protected her still healing injuries. "Tell me if anything hurts," he murmured against her throat. "Tell me if you need me to stop, slow down, or change position. This is about us, Rhea. Not tradition or ceremony or pack expectations. Just us. Then stop talking and kiss me again." His laugh was low and warm. "As my queen commands." The kiss was deeper this time, more urgent, his tongue sliding against hers in a rhythm that promised things to come. Rhea's hands found the planes of his chest, tracing scars and muscle, learning the map of him through touch. His skin was fever hot, his heart thundering beneath her palm, his wolf so close to the surface she could feel it pushing against his control. Kale's hands moved to the silk dress, and with one smooth motion, he pulled it over her head. Cool night air hit her skin for a moment, before his warmth covered her again, skin to skin, nothing between them but moonlight and mutual need. "Beautiful," he breathed. "You're so damn beautiful." Rhea wanted to protest she was still bruised, still healing, still marked by combat and hardship, but the look in his eyes made the protest die unspoken. He saw her, all of her, damaged and strong and imperfect, and found her beautiful anyway. His hands moved over her with reverent exploration, mapping her curves, her scars, the places that made her gasp and arch into his touch. When his mouth followed the same path, Rhea stopped thinking about ceremony or pack witnesses, or anything beyond the sensation of being worshipped by someone who'd promised to cherish her. "Kale." His name came out as a plea. I know." His voice was strained. "I can feel what you need through the bond. It's pulling at me, demanding I complete this." He raised his head, his eyes searching hers. "Are you ready?" Instead of answering with words, Rhea pulled him down into another kiss, deep and demanding, her body arching up to meet his, her wolf singing with recognition and need and an absolute certainty that this was right. Kale positioned himself, his body trembling with the effort of maintaining control. Then slowly, so slowly, it was almost torture, he pressed forward. The moment he entered her, the world exploded into light. The bond snapped into place with the force of lightning striking. Suddenly Rhea could feel Kale's emotions, his overwhelming love, his fierce protectiveness, his absolute awe that she was his mate. She could sense his wolf, powerful and wild and utterly devoted to her. She could feel his pleasure mixing with hers, amplifying, creating a feedback loop that threatened to overwhelm. Rhea. Her name was a prayer and a curse. "I can feel everything. Your pain, your pleasure, your gods. This is intense. Don't stop. Her voice was barely recognizable. "Please don't stop." They moved together, finding a rhythm that was both ancient and entirely new, building towards something that transcended physical pleasure into spiritual connection. The bond strengthened with each movement, threads of silver light visible even with closed eyes, weaving them together until Rhea couldn't tell where she ended and Kale began. Above them, the moon blazed brighter, as if the moon goddess herself was witnessing and blessing their union. Rhea could feel power building, not just physical sensation but magic, the ancient pack magic that bound mates together for life. When the climax hit, it hit them both simultaneously, shared through the bond, amplified, devastating in its intensity. Rhea heard herself cry out, heard Kale's answering roar, felt his body lock and his knot form, binding them together as mate bonds had bound wolves for millennia. Light exploded behind her eyelids, the bond cemented completely, permanent and unbreakable, connecting their souls in a way that would last until death parted them. And in that moment of perfect unity, Rhea felt something else, a presence, vast and ancient and kind. The moon goddess, brushing against their consciousness, offering her blessing and a single whispered message, "Well chosen, my children. Well chosen." Then the presence faded, leaving only Rhea and Kale tangled together in the moonlight, breathing hard, connected in body and soul and spirit. That was... Kale's voice was hoarse. "I don't have words." "Me neither." Rhea's entire body was singing, every nerve alive with sensation and magic and overwhelming emotion. Through the bond, she could feel Kale's love like a physical presence, warm and solid and absolutely certain. "Is it always like that?" "No, true mate bonds are." He trailed off, pressing his forehead to hers. "I've heard stories. My parents were mates, not true mates, just political convenience that grew into affection. They loved each other, but it was nothing like this. This is everything," Rhea finished. "Everything," he agreed. They lay together as his knot slowly released, neither willing to move, both savoring the absolute rightness of being together. Around them, the sacred grove glowed with residual magic, and somewhere in the distance, Rhea could hear wolves howling, the pack celebrating their alpha king's successful mating. Eventually, Kale stirred, pulling her against his chest and wrapping them both in the ceremonial cloak someone had thoughtfully left at the grove's edge. "We should return to the palace," he murmured, "present ourselves to the pack as officially bonded mates. Accept congratulations, endure speeches, all the traditional ceremony nonsense." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But I'm not ready to share you yet." "Then don't." Rhea snuggled closer. "The pack can wait another hour. Right now, I just want to be here with you, feeling this bond, not thinking about politics or responsibility, or anything beyond this moment. As my queen commands." Kale's arms tightened around her. "Though I should warn you, this bond thing goes both ways. I can feel your exhaustion, your pain, the toll the trials took on your body. You need rest, healing, probably another week of Margot's fussing. Later, after we've enjoyed being newly bonded mates for at least a few hours." Rhea looked up at him, seeing her own joy reflected in his expression. "We earned this, Kale. 2 days of trials and political maneuvering and near-death experiences. Can't we just have one night where we're not the alpha king and queen? Where we're just us?" His smile was warm enough to rival the moon. "One night. Then tomorrow, we face the invasion, deal with Victor's political faction, negotiate with your sister, and begin the actual work of ruling together." He pulled her closer. "But tonight? Tonight you're just mine. And I'm just yours. And the rest of the world can wait." Rhea closed her eyes, feeling the bond hum between them, a constant presence that meant she'd never be alone again, never be unwanted, never be worthless. She'd traveled from exile to coronation, from rejected Omega to chosen queen, from surviving to thriving. And this moment of perfect peace in Kale's arms made every trial, every pain, every desperate choice worth it. The moon goddess had chosen. Well, indeed. Chapter 10. The Omega Queen. Dawn came with war drums. Rhea woke to the sound echoing across the northern capital, a rhythmic pounding that spoke of approaching danger. For one disoriented moment, She thought she was back in her cabin with wolves scratching at the door. Then Kale's arm tightened around her waist, and the events of the previous night came flooding back. The ceremony, the bond, the overwhelming connection that now hummed constantly between them, letting her feel his emotions as clearly as her own. Right now, he was tense, alert, preparing for battle. The invasion? She asked quietly. Yes, Kale's voice was grim. Silverpaw forces crossed the border an hour ago. 300 warriors, just as our scouts reported. They're marching toward the capital, likely expecting to find us unprepared after the mating ceremony. His hand traced patterns on her hip. They're about to learn a very painful lesson about Northern Territory readiness. Rhea sat up, ignoring the protest from her still healing body. Through the chamber windows, she could see the palace grounds transforming warriors assembling in formation, weapons being distributed, defensive positions being fortified. The entire territory was mobilizing with efficiency that spoke of extensive training and preparation. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Kale looked at her for a long moment, emotions flickering across his face. Through the bond, she felt his internal struggle, the part of him that wanted to keep her safe, warring with the part that recognized she was queen now, with responsibilities that didn't pause for convenience. "I need you to address the pack," he said finally. "The civilians are frightened. Many remember the last war with Silverpaw, 20 years ago, the casualties, the destruction, the trauma. They need to hear from their queen that we're prepared, that their safety is paramount, that this invasion will be repelled." He paused. "I also need you to speak with your sister. Find out if she knows anything useful about Silverpaw's strategy, their weak points, anything that might help us end this quickly with minimal casualties." "You want me to interrogate Liana?" "I want you to have a conversation." Kale's tone was careful. Not as sisters, not as enemies, but as leaders who both want to minimize bloodshed. "She may be Silverpaw by birth, but she's been detained in our territory for over 12 hours now. She has to know that if we fall, she falls with us. That gives her motivation to help. If she has useful information." It made strategic sense. It also made Rhea's stomach twist with complicated emotions she didn't want to examine too closely. "And you?" she asked. "What will you be doing?" "Leading the defense. The Silverpaw forces expect to face a disorganized territory, unprepared for war. Instead, they're going to face 300 Northern Territory warriors who've trained their entire lives for this moment." His smile was sharp and dangerous. "Victor may have tried to sabotage your trials, but he's a brilliant military tactician. I'm putting him in charge of the left flank. If he wants to prove his loyalty, he can do it in blood." Before Rhea could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Seraphine's voice called through. "My queen, my king, the council has assembled for war strategy. Your presence is required." 5 minutes, Kale called back. He turned to Rhea, his hand cupping her face. "You don't have to do this. You passed the trials, completed the bond. No one would blame you for staying safe in the palace while we handle the military response." "Yes, they would." Rhea covered his hand with hers. "And more importantly, I would blame me. I didn't fight through 3 trials just to hide when things got difficult." She stood, wincing as her injuries made themselves known. "Besides, you can feel through the bond that I'm not the kind of person who sits safely while others fight for her. Might as well accept it now." Kale's laugh was rough with emotion. "I really do love you, you know. Have I mentioned that? Not in words, but I can feel it." Rhea pressed her hand to her chest, where the bond hummed warm and constant. "Every second. Through this connection we share, you love me, and I love you, and that's what's going to make us strong enough to face whatever comes." He pulled her into a fierce kiss, claiming and reassuring and over too quickly. Then they were dressing in practical clothes, him in his battle armor and her in the leather pants and vest that Seraphine had given her for training. The silver crown from the labyrinth box sat on the dressing table, and Rhea placed it on her head with hands that only trembled slightly. Time to be queen. The war council was already in full debate when they arrived. The Great Hall had been transformed, overnight maps covering every surface, troop positions marked with colored stones, scouts delivering constant updates on enemy movements. The council members who'd witnessed her trials now stood as military advisors, their ceremonial robes replaced with practical armor. Can't hold the southern gate with just 50 warriors. Need to evacuate the civilian quarter before they're in range. If we engage them at the river crossing, we have elevation advantage. Silence. Kale's command cut through the arguments. Every wolf in the room immediately quieted, attention snapping to their alpha king. Report, current enemy position and estimated time to engagement. Thaddeus stepped forward, his scarred face grim. Silverpaw forces crossed our border at dawn. They're moving in 3 columns, main force of 200 advancing directly toward the capital, with 2 flanking groups of 50 each attempting to circle around and attack from multiple directions simultaneously. He pointed to the map. We have scouts, shadowing all 3 groups. Current projections put them at the river crossing in approximately 3 hours. Our defensive positioning? 200 warriors at the river crossing, dug in with elevation advantage and prepared defenses. 50 more protecting the civilian evacuation routes. The remaining 50 held in reserve here at the palace, ready to respond to breakthrough attempts. Thaddeus's expression turned calculating. We have superior positioning and knowledge of terrain. If we engage at the river, we can defeat them with minimal casualties on our side. Casualties on theirs? Rhea asked quietly. Every head swiveled toward her. Thaddeus's eyebrows rose. That depends on how quickly they surrender, my queen. If they fight to the death, we're looking at potentially 100 Silverpaw casualties. If they have sense, they'll yield once they realize they're outmatched. And if we don't engage at the river, if we let them reach the capital walls, Victor spoke up from his position near the map. Then we're fighting in populated areas with civilians at risk. The river crossing is the obvious strategic choice. Catch them in open ground where our advantages are maximized. His eyes narrowed. Unless the queen has concerns about killing her birth pack members? The room went silent. It was a test, a challenge wrapped in a reasonable question, designed to probe whether her loyalties had truly shifted, or if she'd prioritized Silverpaw over Northern Territory. Rhea met Victor's gaze steadily. My concern is about unnecessary bloodshed on any side. Silverpaw warriors are following orders from Elder Morana, a leader who sent them to invade without adequate intelligence, likely expecting an easy victory over a distracted territory. She moved to the map, studying the marked positions. They don't know about our defensive preparations. They don't know their diplomatic mission failed. They probably don't even know their diplomat is currently detained in our palace. They're operating on incomplete information provided by a leader who used them as pawns. So you want us to what? Victor's tone was scathing. Send them a politely worded letter explaining why invasion is impolite? I want us to give them a chance to surrender before we slaughter them. Rhea's voice hardened. Set up the defensive position at the river crossing as planned. But send a messenger under flag of truce, someone they'll recognize as legitimate Northern Territory authority. Offer them terms. Withdraw immediately, no casualties. Refuse, and face the consequences of attacking a prepared defense. She looked at Kale. It costs us nothing to offer. And if even some of them take it, that's lives saved on both sides. The council erupted into argument. Half supported her suggestion as tactically sound. Why fight if diplomacy could achieve the same goal? The other half saw it as weakness. Showing mercy to invaders would encourage future attacks. Kale held up his hand, and silence fell. He studied Rhea with an expression she couldn't quite read, emotions shifting rapidly through their bond. Pride. Concern. Calculation. Finally, he nodded. We'll do as the queen suggests. Thaddeus, select a messenger, someone senior enough that Silverpaw can't claim we sent an unimportant emissary. Have them deliver our terms. Withdraw immediately or face overwhelming force at the river crossing. Give them 1 hour to decide. He turned to Victor. And prepare defenses as planned. If they refuse, we engage without mercy. Victor's jaw tightened, but he bowed. As you command, Alpha King. As the council dispersed to implement orders, Kale pulled Rhea aside. That was well done. You found a middle path between bloodthirsty and naive. He paused. But you need to understand, they probably won't accept. Elder Morana sent them here to make a statement. Withdrawing without battle would humiliate her. She'll order them to fight, even if it costs lives. Then at least we'll have tried. Ria's hand found his. And the warriors who die will die knowing they had a choice. That's more than Silverpaw usually gives anyone. More than you were given, Kale said quietly. Yes. Ria thought of her exile, the forced choice between sterilization and banishment. Which is why I won't become like them. I'll offer mercy when I can. And when I can't, her expression hardened. I'll defend our pack with everything I have. Kale's pride flowed through the bond, warm and fierce. Now go talk to your sister. See if she has anything useful. I need to join the warriors at the river crossing. Be safe. The words felt inadequate for the depth of her concern, always. He pressed a quick, hard kiss to her lips. And if things go wrong, if they somehow break through our defenses, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Run. Take the civilian evacuation route and get to safety. Don't try to fight. Don't try to be heroic. Just survive. His golden eyes were intense. I can face any enemy, any danger, knowing you're safe. But if you're at risk, his voice broke slightly. The bond goes both ways, Ria. I'll feel your pain, your fear, your death if it comes. Promise me you'll prioritize survival. Ria wanted to argue, wanted to insist she'd stand beside him, fight with him, refuse to run while others bled. But through the bond, she could feel his genuine terror at the thought of losing her raw and visceral and absolute. I promise, she said. I'll prioritize survival. But only if you do the same. Deal. His smile was brief but genuine. Then he was striding away, calling orders to warriors who fell into formation around him, the Alpha King leading his pack to war. Ria watched him go, feeling the bond stretch but never break, as distance separated them. Then she turned toward a different battle, one that would be fought with words rather than weapons. Liana's confinement quarters were comfortable, bordering on luxurious. The suite included a sitting room with plush furniture, a bedroom with a proper bed, and windows that offered views of the palace gardens. Guards stood at the door, two stern-faced warriors who nodded respectfully as Ria approached. But inside, her sister had been treated as the diplomatic guest Ria had declared her to be. Liana stood at the window, wearing borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit her frame. She turned when Ria entered, her expression carefully neutral. Sister, she said quietly. I heard the war drums. Silverpaw has engaged? Is engaging. We're offering surrender terms first. Ria closed the door, giving them privacy. I need to know what you know about their strategy. Troop strength, weak points, anything that might help us end this quickly. Liana's laugh was bitter. So, you want me to betray my birth pack, provide intelligence that will help you slaughter wolves I grew up with. I want to minimize casualties on all sides. Ria moved to the window, standing beside her twin. From here, she could see warriors assembling in the palace courtyard, could hear the organized chaos of a territory preparing for battle. The wolves Morana sent are following orders. They don't deserve to die because their alpha is playing political games. If you have information that could save lives, theirs or ours, I need it. Liana was silent for a long moment. Then, the main force is largely inexperienced warriors. Morana drafted them from the border patrols, wolves who know basic combat but have never seen real battle. She's sending them to die to make a point. Her voice cracked. She knows they can't win against Northern Territory's elite forces. This invasion was never about victory. It was about creating enough casualties that the Continental Council would investigate, possibly sanction your mate for excessive violence against diplomatic forces. The words landed like physical blows. She sent 300 wolves to die, just to score political points. That's what alphas do. We make hard choices, sacrifice the few for the many. Liana's tone was hollow, as if she was reciting lessons learned long ago. Except this time, I think she also wanted to punish me. For coming here, for potentially sympathizing with you. The warriors she sent, many are from families I'm close with. Friends, people who supported me during my rise through pack ranks. She turned to face Ria. She's killing my support base and blaming you for it. Then help me save them. Ria gripped her sister's shoulders. Tell me about weak points. Where will they be vulnerable? How can we force surrender without massive casualties? Liana pulled away, moving to the center of the room. The flanking groups, the 250 warrior units trying to circle around. They're led by my friend Garrett and his sister Sienna. Both are good people, good warriors, but they're young. If you can capture one of them, force a quick surrender, it'll shake the morale of the main force. They're all connected childhood friends, training partners. Watching their friends fall will break their will to fight faster than any military tactic. It was ruthlessly pragmatic and deeply personal. Exactly the kind of information that could save lives. "Thank you," Rhea said quietly. "Don't thank me. I just betrayed my entire pack." Lyanna sank into a chair, her head in her hands. "Mother will disown me when she finds out. The council will strip my rank. I'll be packless, just like you were." "No." Rhea knelt beside her sister. "If you want, when this is over, you'll have a place here, not as a prisoner or a political hostage, but as a member of Northern Territory, an advisor who understands Silverpaw politics and can help us navigate future conflicts without bloodshed." She paused. "Or you can return to Silverpaw and report everything you've seen, try to salvage your position there, your choice." Lyanna looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you offering me this? After everything I did to you? Because I understand now. You were trying to survive in a system that values strength over compassion. You made choices I don't agree with, but you made them because you thought you had no other option." Rhea stood. "I'm offering you what I wanted 5 years ago, a real choice. Not between bad and worse, but between genuinely different futures. Think about it. Decide what you want, not what others expect of you." Before Lyanna could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Seraphine burst through the door, her expression urgent. "My queen," the messenger returned. "Silverpaw refused surrender terms. They're advancing on the river crossing, and—" She hesitated. Elder Marana sent a personal message. She says if you want to prevent casualties, you should turn yourself over to Silverpaw custody, submit to the original sterilization order, return to your exile, and she'll call off the invasion. The room went silent. Rhea felt the bond surge Kale's absolute fury at the demand. His fear that she might actually consider it. His determination to protect her regardless of cost. She sent back calm reassurance through the connection. "What did the Alpha King say?" Rhea asked. "That Marana can go to hell, and if she wants you, she'll have to go through him and 300 Northern Territory warriors to get you." Seraphine's smile was sharp. "Also, that you're queen now. And queens don't negotiate with terrorists." "He's not wrong." Rhea moved toward the door. "But I'm not hiding in the palace while others fight for me. Seraphine, I need you to escort Lyanna to the council chambers. She has intelligence about Silverpaw's flanking units that could save lives. Make sure Thaddeus gets the information and adjusts our strategy accordingly." "And you?" Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "Where are you going?" "To the river crossing." Rhea's voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her. "To stand beside my mate and show Silverpaw that their rejected Omega is now a queen they can't threaten or manipulate. The Alpha King will lose his mind if you show up at a battle. Probably. But he'll also understand why I have to." Rhea looked at her sister one last time. "Think about my offer, Lyanna. Whatever you decide, I hope you find a future worth fighting for." Then she was striding from the room, Seraphine hurrying to keep pace, heading toward war and destiny and a confrontation 5 years in the making. The river crossing was a masterpiece of defensive positioning. Northern Territory warriors had dug in along the high ground overlooking the water, creating fortified positions that would force Silverpaw forces to charge uphill through the river, while under constant attack. Archers lined the ridges, warriors with shields formed the front line, and in the center, standing on a raised platform that gave him clear view of the battlefield, stood Kale. He sensed Rhea's approach before she arrived, the bond alerting him to her presence. When she emerged from the tree line, his head snapped around, and the emotions that flooded through their connection were complex. Fury that she'd put herself at risk. Pride that she'd refused to hide. Love that transcended any single feeling. "You promised you'd prioritize survival," he said as she climbed to his position. "I am. Because if you fall, I fall anyway. That's how mate bonds work." Rhea moved to his side, looking out over the battlefield. "So, my survival means keeping you alive." which means being here to drag you away if you do something heroically stupid. Despite everything, Kale laughed. Fair point. He wrapped an arm around her waist. Then stay behind the front lines. Watch from here. But don't engage directly. If they break through, which they won't, you run. Understood? Understood. A scout approached, breathing hard. Alpha King Silverpaw forces are 5 minutes out. Main force approaching from the south. Flanking units attempting to cross upriver and downriver simultaneously. Victor, take your forces and intercept the downriver flank. Thaddeus, the upriver group is yours. Use the intelligence the Queen provided, target the leaders, force quick surrender. Kale's voice carried across the defensive positions. No unnecessary killing. We offer mercy to those who yield, but anyone who fights dies. Clear? A chorus of acknowledgements rippled through the warriors. Then, from across the river, they appeared. 300 Silverpaw warriors emerged from the forest, forming ranks on the opposite shore. Even from a distance, Rhea could see their uncertainty, the way they hesitated, the glances they exchanged, the body language that spoke of wolves following orders they didn't fully understand or support. These weren't battle-hardened veterans. These were young warriors, border patrol members, wolves who'd been conscripted for a war their alpha wanted but they hadn't chosen. A single figure rode forward, Elder Marana herself, mounted on a massive horse, wearing ceremonial armor that gleamed in the morning sun. She stopped at the river's edge and raised her voice to carry across the water. Kale Nightfang, Alpha King of Northern Territory, you hold property belonging to Silverpaw Pack. Return the Omega to our custody, and we will withdraw peacefully. Refuse, and we will take her by force. The words echoed across the battlefield. Hundreds of wolves on both sides watched, waiting to see how their leaders would respond. Kale's hand tightened on Rhea's waist. Then he stepped forward, his voice carrying with alpha resonance that made even enemy wolves instinctively straighten to attention. Elder Marana, you stand on Northern Territory land, having invaded with armed forces during a sacred mating ceremony. You demand return of an exile you discarded 5 years ago, who has since been recognized by the Moon Goddess herself as true mate to your Alpha King and Queen of these territories. His smile was cold. Your request is denied. Withdraw now, and we'll allow safe passage. Advance, and we'll teach you why Northern Territory has never lost a war. Then we advance. Morana's voice rang out. And when we're finished, your precious Omega will learn that defiance has consequences. Silverpaw warriors attack. The battlefield exploded into chaos. Silverpaw forces surged across the river, charging uphill into prepared defenses. Northern Territory warriors met them with coordinated precision archers, unleashing volleys that thinned the enemy ranks. Shield walls forming impenetrable barriers. Warriors engaging in brutal close combat that showcased years of superior training. It was magnificent and terrible, and over almost before it began. The main Silverpaw force hit the defensive line and broke against it like water against stone. Warriors fell injured, not killed, as Kale's forces showed restraint even in the midst of battle. But the sheer difference in skill was evident. Northern Territory warriors moved like a single organism, while Silverpaw forces fought as confused individuals. From the flanking positions, Rhea heard sounds of similar engagement. Victor's forces intercepted the downriver group. Thaddeus's warriors captured the upriver leaders in a swift, brutal maneuver that ended with Garrett and Sienna kneeling in surrender, less than 5 minutes after engagement began. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, 200 Silverpaw warriors knelt in surrender. 50 lay injured but alive under Northern Territory guard, and Elder Marana sat on her horse, surrounded by Kale's elite warriors, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. Impossible, she whispered. You should have been unprepared. Distracted by ceremony, vulnerable. You thought wrong. Kale descended from his platform, Rhea at his side. You underestimated Northern Territory. You underestimated me, and most critically, he gestured to Rhea, you underestimated her. The Omega you threw away. The woman you called worthless. She's the reason your forces received surrender offers. She's the reason we targeted leaders for capture rather than killing your entire force. She showed you more mercy than you showed her in 5 years of exile. Marana's eyes locked onto Rhea, hatred burning in their depths. You dare stand there wearing a crown? You're Omega, genetically inferior. You belong in kitchens, not on thrones. I belong exactly where I am. Rhea's voice was steady. And your warriors are alive to return home because I convinced my mate to show mercy. Something you never understood, that strength isn't about domination or cruelty. It's about protecting those weaker than yourself. All of them. Not just the ones you deem valuable. She stepped forward until she stood directly before Marana's horse. You sent 300 wolves to die just to hurt me. To prove I was worthless. That rejecting you was a mistake. But all you've proven is that Silverpaw's leadership is willing to sacrifice their own people for ego and political maneuvering. Rhea's eyes swept across the kneeling warriors, young wolves who'd followed. Orders into disaster. Any Silverpaw warrior who wishes to remain in Northern Territory, to join a pack that values all its members, will be granted sanctuary. We'll give you food, shelter, training, and a place where your worth isn't determined by genetics or hierarchy. The choice is yours. Silence fell across the battlefield. Then, slowly, one warrior stood, then another, then 5, 10, 20. By the time the movement stopped, nearly 50 Silverpaw warriors had risen, choosing Northern Territory over their birth pack, choosing hope over returning to leaders who'd sent them into unwinnable battles. Marana's face went white with rage. Traitors, all of you, you'll never be allowed to return. Good. The warrior who'd stood first, a young woman with determined eyes, met Rhea's gaze. Because I don't want to serve a pack that treats people as disposable. I'll serve a queen who sees value in everyone instead. The other defectors echoed her sentiment. Marana sat on her horse, watching her power base crumble, unable to do anything but witness her own defeat. Take the elder into custody, Kale ordered. She'll be tried by the Continental Council for unprovoked invasion, for sending warriors into battle under false pretenses, and for attempting to violate Northern Territory sovereignty during sacred ceremony. He turned to the remaining Silverpaw warriors. The rest of you are free to return home. Tell your council what you saw here. Tell them that Northern Territory offers mercy to those who deserve it, and overwhelming force to those who threaten us. Tell them that the Omega they discarded is now a queen they'll answer to if they ever attempt invasion again. The warriors bowed, not in submission, but in respect, and began their long march home. The defectors were escorted toward the capital by Northern Territory guides, who would help them integrate into their new pack. And Elder Marana, still seated on her horse and surrounded by guards, stared at Rhea with undisguised loathing. This isn't over, she hissed. The Continental Council will see that you violated every diplomatic protocol by invading during mating ceremony, by threatening a bonded mate, by sacrificing your own warriors for political gain. Kale's voice was cold. You gambled everything on destroying Rhea and proving she was worthless. Instead, you've lost your military force, your political credibility, and your position as elder. Silverpaw Pack will disavow you to save themselves. You're finished, Marana. The truth of his words settled over the battlefield. Marana's expression crumbled rage, giving way to the realization that she'd destroyed herself through her own hatred and pride. Guards led her away. The battlefield began to clear, wounded being tended, defenses being dismantled, warriors celebrating a victory achieved with minimal loss of life. And Rhea stood beside Kale, their bond humming with shared emotion, watching the sun climb higher over a territory that had become her home. Well, Kale said quietly, that was dramatic. Slightly. Rhea leaned against him, exhaustion crashing over her now that the adrenaline was fading. But effective. You offered them a choice, showed mercy, proved that Omega Queens can be just as strong, maybe stronger than any alpha. His arm wrapped around her waist. I'm proud of you. We won together. Rhea looked up at him. That's what mates do, what queens and kings do. We face challenges side by side, balance each other's strengths and weaknesses, and create something better than either could achieve alone. Kale's kiss was gentle, despite the violence that had surrounded them moments before. Come on. Let's go home. We have defectors to welcome, a sister to negotiate with, political fallout to manage, and, he grinned, a proper coronation ceremony to plan. Can't have our queen officially ruling without appropriate pageantry. More ceremonies? Rhea groaned. Can't I just wear the crown and call it done? Absolutely not. You'll have at least 3 days of speeches, formal presentations, diplomatic meetings with allied pacts, and a feast that will require you to smile politely while elderly council members tell you stories about previous queens. His eyes danced with amusement. I'll suffer through it with you, if that helps. It does. Rhea took his hand. As long as we're together, I can handle ceremonies, politics, and whatever else comes our way. They walked back toward the capital through morning light that turned everything golden. Behind them, warriors cleaned up the battlefield with efficient precision. Ahead, the city was coming alive, civilians emerging from evacuation shelters, celebrating the victory, preparing to welcome their new queen. And somewhere in the crowd, Rhea knew, Seraphine and the Queen's Guard were already planning security details. Finn was drafting coronation speeches. Margot was preparing healing supplies. Liana was considering her future. 50 Silverpaw defectors were beginning their integration into a pack that would value them properly. Life was moving forward. Building. Growing. Rhea had traveled from worthless exile to queen in less than a week. She'd passed trials, won battles, created peace, and claimed a future she'd never dared imagine. But more than any crown or title or political victory, she'd found something infinitely more valuable: belonging, purpose, love that didn't require her to be anything other than herself. The moon goddess had been right to send Kale into that blizzard. Right to declare Rhea worthy of rescue, of protection, of a mate bond that would span their lifetimes. And as they entered the capital to cheers and celebration, Rhea made a silent promise to that divine presence who'd guided her path. She would be the queen these wolves deserved, would fight for the overlooked, protect the weak, and prove that worth wasn't determined by genetics or hierarchy. Would build a territory where every wolf, alpha, beta, omega had value and voice. She would honor the gift she'd been given, by using it to lift others up. The omega had become queen, and her reign was just beginning. Epilogue. 6 months later, the council chamber had never been so crowded. Rhea stood at the center, wearing the silver crown and formal robes that marked her position. Around her, representatives from 7 different packs had assembled alphas and betas and, for the first time in continental history, 3 other omegas who'd been granted council positions in their territories. The Omega Rights Accord lay on the table before them, ready for signing. It had taken 6 months of negotiation, compromise, and political maneuvering to reach this point. 6 months of Rhea using her position to advocate for changes that would protect Omegas across all territories. 6 months of facing opposition, skepticism, and outright hostility from packs who'd benefited from the old hierarchy. But she'd persisted. And Kale had stood beside her, using his authority as Alpha King to push reluctant packs toward acceptance. The accord was simple. Omegas could not be sterilized without consent, could not be barred from pack positions based solely on designation, could not be exiled or punished for refusing orders that violated their bodily autonomy. Basic rights that should have existed all along. Are we ready? Rhea asked the assembled representatives. One by one, they nodded. Some with enthusiasm, others with resignation, but all acknowledging that the continental pack structure was evolving, that the Northern Territory's Omega Queen had proven something important about worth and value and the fallacy of genetic hierarchy. They signed, each representative adding their mark to the document, binding their packs to the new standards, creating a future where Rhea's story, exile, suffering, rejection would become increasingly rare. When the last signature was added, the chamber erupted in applause. Rhea felt tears prick her eyes, felt Kale's pride flooding through their bond, felt the weight of accomplishment settle over her shoulders. This was why the moon goddess had chosen her. Not just to be queen, but to change what queen meant, to use her position to lift others up, to create the world she'd wished existed when she was alone in that cabin. Well done, my queen. Kale's voice was soft beside her. You've changed the world. We've changed it, Rhea corrected. Together, his hand found hers, their fingers interlacing in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Outside, the northern capital celebrated. Inside, political alliances shifted and adapted to new realities. And in the Queen's chambers, A nursery was being prepared because 3 months ago, Margot had confirmed what Rhea suspected. She was pregnant. A new life growing. A future being built. A story that had started with exile and evolved into something beautiful and powerful and right. Rhea had been told she was worthless. She'd proven she was priceless. And as she stood in the council chamber, surrounded by representatives who now treated her with respect, rather than contempt, holding the hand of the mate who'd traveled through a blizzard to save her, Rhea knew with absolute certainty this was exactly where she belonged.